At the store, I paid for an elderly woman groceries because her card was declined. She did not say thank you immediately. Instead, she leaned in close, her grip on my wrist surprisingly strong for her age, and whispered something that chilled me more than the Chicago wind. "When your wife leaves, do not touch the snow in your yard." I laughed it off at the time, thinking she was just a confused old soul. But I remembered her words. The next morning, when I stepped onto my porch and looked out at the white blanket covering my property, I nearly collapsed at what I saw, or rather, what I did not see. Before I tell you what made a 70-year-old man fall to his knees in horror, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had a gut feeling that saved your life. My name is Booker Washington, and I have lived in Chicago all my life. I built my house with my own two hands, brick by brick, back when I was a young contractor, and I thought love was enough to hold a roof up. I was wrong. It started yesterday afternoon at the local grocery store. The storm of the century was rolling in and everyone was panic buying. The line was long and people were impatient. In front of me stood a woman I had seen around the neighborhood a few times, Mrs. Higgins. She wore a coat that had seen better decades, and she was staring at the card reader, which was beeping that terrible rejection sound. The cashier, a young girl popping gum, looked annoyed and started to take the milk and bread off the belt. I could see the shame rising in Mrs. Higgins' neck. She was trembling not from the cold, but from the humiliation. I did not think twice. I stepped forward and swiped my card. "Put it on my tab," I told the cashier. It was only $50. To me, that is not much, but to Mrs. Higgins, it was dignity. She waited for me by the exit doors. The automatic doors were sliding open and closed, letting in gusts of freezing air. I expected a simple nod or a thank you. Instead, she grabbed my arm. Her eyes were milky with cataracts, but they were sharp. They looked right through me. "When your wife leaves, do not touch the snow in your yard." The specificity of it made me pause. How did she know my wife was leaving? How did she know about my yard? I tried to ask her what she meant, but she turned and walked into the snow, disappearing like a ghost. I drove home shaking my head. I told myself she was just eccentric. Old folks in this neighborhood say strange things sometimes. But the unease settled in my stomach like a stone. The drive home was treacherous. The radio was warning that this blizzard would bury Chicago under 2 feet of snow by morning. Visibility was near zero. I was gripping the steering wheel of my truck, thinking about a hot meal and a warm fire. I thought about Lucille, my wife of 40 years. I thought maybe we would sit by the fire and watch the snowfall. I was a fool. When I unlocked the front door, the heat hit me, but so did the chaos. The hallway was lined with suitcases. Not just 1 or 2, but 4 large designer suitcases, the kind I paid for but never used. Lucille was running around the living room in a summer dress, holding a stack of clothes. She looked up when I entered, and her face was not filled with the warmth of a wife greeting her husband. It was filled with annoyance. "You are finally home, Booker," she snapped. "I need you to carry these to the porch. They are coming in 10 minutes. I stood there, stomping the snow off my boots, trying to process the scene. "Who is coming? Where are you going, Lucille?" "It is 10 degrees below zero outside." She did not even stop folding her silk scarves. "I am going to Florida, Booker. I am going to stay with my sister for a while. Maybe a month. Maybe forever. I cannot take another winter in this drafty old house with you. I am suffocating here." Her words hit me harder than the cold. Suffocating. In the house I built for her. In the life I worked 18-hour days to provide. I looked at her, really looked at her. At 65, she was still a beautiful woman, but her beauty had become hard. She spent more time at the beauty salon and the mall than she did at home. She was chasing a youth that was long gone, and she blamed me for the passage of time. "You are leaving now?" I asked, my voice low. "In the middle of a blizzard." Lucille rolled her eyes. "That is exactly why I am leaving now. Jared and Chantel are picking me up. They are driving me to the airport. Our flight is in 3 hours, before the airport closes." I felt a heavy thud in my chest at the mention of Jared. My son-in-law. A white man with a smile that never reached his eyes and a handshake that felt like a dead fish. He was a failed stockbroker who acted like he owned Wall Street. And my daughter Chantel. My poor, sweet Chantel, who had become a shadow of herself since marrying him. A horn honked outside. It was a rhythmic, arrogant honk. I knew who it was. I opened the door and saw Jared's luxury SUV idling in my driveway. The headlights cut through the swirling snow. Jared jumped out wearing a coat that probably cost more than my first car. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He just looked at the house and smirked. "Hey, Booker, try to keep the heat on, will you? Don't want the pipes to burst in this shack while we are gone." He laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. Chantel stayed in the car. She did not even look out the window. I watched as Jared grabbed 2 suitcases and Lucille grabbed the others. "So this is it," I said to Lucille. "You are just walking out, no discussion, no goodbye." She paused at the bottom of the steps. The snow was already covering her expensive boots. "Don't be dramatic, Booker. I just need some sun. You are so boring lately. All you do is sit in that chair and read the paper. I want to live." She turned her back on me. She did not hug me. She did not look back. I stood in the open doorway, letting the heat escape, watching my wife get into the car with a man I despised and a daughter who wouldn't look at me. Jared slammed the trunk shut and gave me a mock salute. "Try not to freeze, old man." He got in and they drove off. The taillights disappeared into the white void within seconds. I was alone. The silence in the house was deafening. It was a big house, too big for one man. I locked the door and walked to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of whiskey. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from rage. Boring. She called me boring. I was the one who made sure the bills were paid. I was the one who fixed the roof when it leaked. I was the one who made sure she never had to work a day in her life. And this was my reward, being left behind like an old piece of furniture. I finished the whiskey and looked out the window. The snow was falling harder now. Thick, heavy flakes. It was accumulating fast on the walkway and the porch. My instincts as a homeowner kicked in. If I let that snow freeze overnight, it would turn into ice. It would be a hazard. I needed to shovel the walkway. It was routine. It was what I did. I walked to the mudroom and grabbed my heavy coat and my gloves. I reached for the shovel that leaned against the wall. My hand was on the handle when I heard it. A whisper in my ear as clear as if she was standing right next to me. "When your wife leaves, do not touch the snow in your yard." Mrs. Higgins' voice. Why would she say that? What did she know? I stood there in the dark mudroom gripping the shovel. I felt foolish. I was a grown man listening to the superstitions of a stranger. I told myself to open the door and shovel the walk like I always did, but my feet would not move. A feeling of dread washed over me, a primal warning. I let go of the shovel. It clattered against the wall. I stepped back. I decided to trust the gut feeling that had kept me alive on dangerous construction sites for 40 years. I walked back into the living room and turned off all the lights. I sat in my armchair in the dark, facing the window that looked out onto the backyard. I watched the snow pile up, inch by inch, covering the grass, covering the garden path, covering everything in a white shroud. I did not sleep that night. I just watched, waiting for something I could not name, waiting for the morning to reveal what the darkness was hiding. And when the sun finally rose, casting a pale gray light over Chicago, I stood up and walked to the back door. I looked out, and my heart stopped beating. Because the snow tells stories if you know how to read it. And the story written in my backyard was a nightmare. I woke up with a stiff neck and a cold ache in my joints that had nothing to do with the temperature. The armchair I had spent the night in was positioned directly facing the bay window overlooking the backyard, but my eyes opened to the gray light of the living room. I had dozed off. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times. 7 in the morning. I had slept for maybe 3 hours at most, sitting vigil like a guard dog in an empty house. The silence was absolute. No furnace humming, no coffee pot gurgling, just the heavy, suffocating silence of a house that had been abandoned. I pushed myself up my knees, popping in protest. The house was freezing. Jared had made a joke about the pipes bursting, and I realized with a jolt of anger that he might have been right. I needed to check the thermostat, but first I needed to look outside. I needed to see what the morning light would reveal. I walked to the front door first. My hand hovered over the deadbolt. I remembered Mrs. Higgins' words, "Don't touch the snow." I did not open the door. Instead, I moved to the side window that gave me a clear view of the front porch and the driveway. My breath hitched in my throat. The storm had done its work. The world was buried under at least 18 inches of pristine white powder. It was beautiful in a cruel way. The street was a river of white. The cars parked along the curb were just soft mounds. But my eyes were drawn to the walkway. The concrete path leading from my front steps to the driveway where Jared's SUV had been idling last night. It was flawless. I stared at it blinking, trying to make sense of the physics. We had stood there last night. Lucille had dragged 2 suitcases. Jared had dragged 2 more. They had trampled that snow. The SUV had churned up the driveway, and yet this morning the snow lay across the walkway like a perfectly smoothed sheet, flat, unbroken, innocent. I am a contractor. I know how materials settle. I know how weight impacts surfaces. If they had walked through the snow last night and the storm had continued, the fresh snow would have filled in their footprints. Yes, but it would have left depressions, shadows. The surface would be uneven. A divot where a heel struck. A trough where a suitcase wheel cut. But there was nothing. It was as if the snow had fallen on a surface that had never been touched. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Had the wind been that strong? Had it sculpted the drifts so perfectly that it erased all evidence of their departure? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? Was I becoming the senile old man they accused me of being? I stood there for 10 minutes analyzing the slope of the drifts, the angle of the wind. It was possible, I told myself. It was a blizzard after all. Maybe the wind scoured the front yard clean and laid down a fresh carpet. I turned away from the front window, trying to calm my racing heart. I needed coffee. I needed to stop thinking like a conspiracy theorist. I walked into the kitchen, passing the back door. The window on the back door was frosted over. I rubbed a circle in the glass with my warm palm, melting the ice enough to see the backyard. And that is when my legs gave out. I grabbed the kitchen counter to keep from hitting the linoleum. My heart, which had been racing moments ago, now slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. The backyard was not flawless. The backyard was a crime scene written in ice. Unlike the front yard, which was exposed to the street and the wind, the backyard was fenced in. High wooden fences that I had built myself to give Lucille privacy for her garden. The fence blocked the wind. The snow back here had settled straight down, heavy and undisturbed, except for one path. It started from the side gate, a gate that was always locked, a gate that led to the alley. But the tracks did not come from the alley. They came from the side of the house, from the blind spot where the security cameras did not reach. I pressed my face closer to the cold glass. There were footprints, deep, heavy footprints, the kind made by a large man carrying a heavy load. They were wide apart, indicating struggle or weight, and alongside the footprints was a furrow, a wide, deep drag mark, as if something heavy, something that dragged its heels, had been pulled through the deep powder. The trail did not lead to the alley. It did not lead to the street. It led straight to the garden shed. The shed sat at the far corner of the lot, nestled under the old oak tree. It was a sturdy structure built on a concrete foundation. I had built it 10 years ago for my tools. But 3 years ago, when Jared and Chantel moved into their new house, Jared had asked if they could store some of Chantel's old things there. Boxes of college books, seasonal decorations, things they did not have room for. I had said yes. Since then, Jared had put a heavy-duty padlock on the door. He had the only key. He told me he didn't want me hurting my back moving their boxes around. "Keep out, Booker," he would say with that fake smile. "It is just junk anyway." Now, looking at that shed across the expanse of snow, it looked less like a storage unit and more like a tomb. The drag marks stopped at the shed door. The snow around the door was trampled, packed down tight, as if someone had stood there fumbling with a lock for a long time. And then there were footprints leading away. Just footprints this time, no drag marks. Lighter, faster, leading back toward the side of the house and disappearing around the corner. My mind raced. The logic was terrifying. If the front yard was smooth, it meant the snow had filled in everything from early last night. But the tracks in the backyard were sharp, defined. They were fresh, or at least fresher than the ones in the front. It meant someone had been in my backyard after the worst of the storm had passed. I unlocked the back door. The mechanism was stiff with cold. I pushed it open, and the Arctic air rushed in, biting my face. I stepped out onto the small back porch. I did not step into the snow. I remembered Mrs. Higgins. Do not touch the snow. I needed to preserve this, whatever this was. I squinted at the drag mark. It was about 2 feet wide, the width of a suitcase, or a body. Lucille. The name screamed in my head. I thought about her leaving, the way she didn't look back, the way Jared slammed the trunk. Had she really gotten into that car? I saw her get in. I saw the car drive away. I was sure of it. But what if they came back? What if they drove around the block, waited for me to turn off the lights, and then came back to the alley? Why? Why would they do that? To hide something. Or someone. I looked at the shed again. It looked innocent enough, painted a soft gray with white trim. But in the stark light of the snow-covered morning, it felt sinister. The padlock glinted in the pale sun. I stepped back inside and locked the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the latch. I needed to think. I needed to be rational. Maybe Jared came back to drop off a box. Maybe he dragged a heavy cooler. Maybe he dragged a piece of furniture, but in a blizzard, at night, without telling me. And why lie about the front walkway? Why did the front look so undisturbed if they had just left a few hours ago? I walked to the kitchen table and sat down. My phone was sitting there on the placemat. It buzzed, vibrating against the wood, making me jump. I picked it up. A text message from Lucille. My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened it. Arrived safely in Florida. The flight was bumpy, but we made it. Sunny and 80 degrees here already. Going to get some breakfast. Love you. I stared at the words. Then I looked out the window at the swirling snow and the gray sky. Florida, sunny, 80 degrees. I looked at the timestamp. 7:15 a.m. A flight to Florida takes 3 hours minimum, plus travel time to the airport, plus security, plus getting bags, plus driving to the hotel. They left at 8:00 p.m. last night. It was now morning. The timeline fit. Physically, it was possible for her to be in Florida, but then I looked at the backyard again, at the drag marks leading to the shed, and then I did something I had not done in years. I checked the weather app on my phone, not for Chicago, for Miami, where Lucille's sister lived. Current weather in Miami: thunderstorms, 68 degrees, sunny and 80 degrees. She was lying, or someone was lying for her. I read the text again. Going to get some breakfast. Love you. Lucille never texted love you. She always wrote love Lucille. She was formal like that, even in texts. And she never ate breakfast. She only drank coffee until noon. She said eating early made her sluggish. This was not Lucille. I looked back at the shed. The padlock seemed to mock me. If she was not in Florida, and if the front yard snow said she never really walked away, and if the backyard snow said something was dragged to the shed, then my wife was not eating breakfast in Miami. My wife was 50 feet away from me, locked in a cold, dark box at the bottom of the garden, and I was standing in the kitchen of a house that was no longer a home. It was a stage, and I was the only actor who didn't know his lines. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. Rage began to replace the fear, a cold, hard rage that felt like the iron bars I used to bend on construction sites. They thought I was old. They thought I was stupid. They thought I would look at the snow and see nothing but weather. But I saw blueprints. I saw patterns. And I saw a structural failure in their lie. I stood up. I did not go to the shed. Not yet. If I went to the shed, I would leave tracks. And if I left tracks, I would destroy the evidence. And right now, that snow was the only witness I had. Instead, I went to the hallway closet. I dug past the winter coats, past the vacuum cleaner, until my hand touched cold metal. My old toolbox. The heavy red one I had carried since 1980. I opened the latches. They snapped loud in the quiet house. I took out a pair of high-powered binoculars. I went back to the kitchen window. I rested my elbows on the sill to steady my hands. I focused the lenses on the shed door. I zoomed in on the padlock. It was a master lock. Heavy duty. But hanging from the hasp, caught in the metal loop, was a tiny shred of fabric. It was pale blue. Silk. The same color as the scarf Lucille had been folding last night. I lowered the binoculars. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin, as if the oxygen had been sucked out. She was there. They had put her there. But why? Why stage a departure only to lock her in the backyard? Why send a fake text, unless the departure was for me? To make me think she was gone, to make me think I was alone. And the shed. That was storage. Cold storage. I looked at the text message again. Safe in Florida. I typed a reply. My fingers were stiff but steady. Glad you made it safe. Enjoy the sun. I will miss you. I hit send. I was playing their game now. If they thought I bought the lie, they would get sloppy. They would make a mistake. I watched the phone. The status changed to delivered. Then read. They were watching. Waiting to see if the old man took the bait. I put the phone down. I walked to the pantry and opened a can of coffee. The smell was rich and familiar. I went through the motions. Filter. Water. Scoop. Button. I needed to act normal. I needed to be the boring husband who sat in his chair and read the paper. But as the coffee brewed sputtering and hissing into the pot, I looked at the knife block on the counter. The butcher knife was missing. I scanned the kitchen. Lucille was messy when she cooked, but she always put the knives back. Always. The block had an empty slot, the biggest slot. I looked back at the drag marks in the snow. There was no blood. The snow was white, but a heavy coat could hide a lot of blood. Or maybe the knife wasn't for her. Maybe it was for me. The coffee pot beeped. I poured a cup black. I walked back to the living room and sat in my chair facing the window, facing the shed. I sipped the hot liquid and waited. I did not know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. The snow was going to melt, and when it did, the truth would be uglier than the mud beneath it. But for now, the white blanket was my ally. It held the footprints of their betrayal, and as long as I didn't touch it, those footprints were screaming a confession loud enough for the whole world to hear. I checked my watch, 8:20 a.m. Suddenly my phone rang, a video call from Jared. I stared at the screen. His smiling face popped up on the caller ID. Why would he video call me at 8 a.m. after driving all night and flying to Florida? Unless he wanted to check on me, or show me something. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my sweater. I put a confused, sleepy expression on my face. I swiped answer. Good morning, Booker. Jared's voice boomed through the speaker, too loud, too cheerful. I looked at the screen. And that was when I saw the second crack in their perfect little play. The ringtone of my phone shattered the silence of the kitchen like a dropped hammer on a tile floor. It was a jarring, cheerful tune that Chantel had set for me years ago, something that sounded like a tropical marimba band. Given the circumstances, it felt like a cruel joke. I looked at the screen and saw Jared's name pulsing there. My thumb hovered over the answer button. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs and steady my heart rate. I needed to be convincing. I needed to be the old man they thought I was, the confused, heartbroken retiree who had lost his wife and his wits in the same night. I swiped the green icon and held the phone up. The screen filled with light, too much light. It was blinding compared to the gray gloom of my kitchen. When my eyes adjusted, I saw Jared's face. He was wearing sunglasses and a white polo shirt with the collar popped up. Behind him was the shimmering blue water of a swimming pool and lush green foliage. The sound of splashing water and distant birds chirping came through the speaker. "Good morning, Booker," he said, his voice loud and distorted by the connection. "Or should I say good afternoon. It is absolutely gorgeous down here. I hope you are staying warm up there in the tundra." I squinted at the screen playing the part. "Jared, where are you?" I asked, my voice raspy. "Where is Lucille? The house is so empty." Jared smiled, a wide white smile that showed too many teeth. "We are at the rental house, Booker. I told you. Chantel found this amazing place near the beach. It is paradise. Lucille is right over there by the pool. She is relaxing. She needs this, Booker. She really needs this." He turned the camera around. The image swiveled dizzyingly and then settled on a figure sitting in a lounge chair at the far end of the pool. It was Lucille. Or at least it was a woman wearing Lucille's wide-brimmed straw hat and her favorite yellow sundress. She was holding a cocktail with a little umbrella in it. She was facing away from the camera, looking toward the fake horizon. "Lucille," I called out. "Lucille, is that you?" The figure in the chair turned slightly. She waved a hand languidly. She was wearing enormous black sunglasses that covered half her face. "Hey, Booker," she called out. Her voice sounded tinny, distant. "I am fine. Just enjoying the sun. Don't worry about me." "Let me talk to her, Jared," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "Let me see her face. Bring the phone closer." Jared pulled the camera back to himself. "Ah, sorry, Booker," she said. "She needs space, remember? No up-close interrogations. She is fragile right now. She just wanted you to know she is safe and happy. Look at her. She looks 10 years younger already, doesn't she?" He flipped the camera back to her for a split second, then back to himself. I stared at the frozen image of his smirk. But my mind was rewinding the tape. My brain was not processing the emotion, it was processing the data. I spent 40 years looking at blueprints, looking at landscapes, looking at how structures sat in their environment. You do not survive in construction if you do not have an eye for detail. You notice when a wall is a quarter-inch out of plumb. You notice when a foundation has a hairline crack. And I noticed something about that video, the tree. Behind the lounge chair where Lucille was sitting there was a large palm tree, a queen palm. I know trees. I planted the oaks in my own yard. In the video, the wind was clearly blowing. I could hear the wind in the microphone, a soft, rushing sound. I could see the water in the pool rippling. I could see the hem of Lucille's dress fluttering. But the palm tree did not move. Not a single frond swayed. Not an inch of the trunk bent. It stood there, rigid, perfectly still. I looked closer at the background. The sky was a brilliant, unblemished blue. Too blue. And the shadows. That was the giveaway. That was the mistake only a man who has never worked a day outside in his life would make. It was 8:30 in the morning. In Florida, the sun would be rising in the east. The shadows should be long, stretching out across the pool deck toward the west. But on the screen, the shadow of the diving board was directly underneath it. Short, sharp. The kind of shadow you get at noon when the sun is directly overhead. And then I saw the edges. Around Jared's hair, where the white polo shirt met the blue water, there was a faint shimmering halo, a pixelated fuzz. It was a green screen, or a digital background. They were not at a pool. They were not in Florida. That video of Lucille was pre-recorded, probably filmed last summer when we actually went to Miami on vacation. That was why she was wearing that dress. That was why she was waving from so far away. They had edited it, looped it, and stuck it behind Jared's face. He was likely sitting in his car or in a hotel room right here in Chicago, shivering just like I was, but projecting an image of paradise to fool an old man. My stomach turned over. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They had gone to the trouble of faking a video just to keep me quiet, just to keep me from calling the police. It meant they needed time. Time for what? To sell the house, to drain the accounts, or to make sure Lucille never came back. I felt a surge of adrenaline that made my hands shake, but this time I used the shaking. I let it take over my whole body. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open slightly. "Jared," I said, letting my voice crack. "I don't feel so good." Jared's smile faltered for a second. "What do you mean, Booker?" I coughed, a deep, wet cough that I dredged up from the bottom of my lungs. It wasn't hard. The air in the house was dry and cold. I hacked until my eyes watered. I clutched my chest, my heart. "Jared, it is fluttering like a bird in a cage, and I am so cold. The furnace. I think the furnace is dying." I tried to turn it up, but I held my trembling hand up to the camera. "Look at me. I can't even hold a spoon." Jared leaned closer to the screen. His expression shifted from mockery to predatory interest. "Did you take your medication, Booker?" I shook my head weak. "I ran out. I was supposed to go to the pharmacy yesterday, but with the storm, and now Lucille is gone. I don't know where the prescription is. I don't know where the insurance card is. She handled all that. I am useless without her, Jared. I am just a useless old man." I slumped back in the chair, letting the phone drop slightly so he got a view of my chin in the ceiling. I wanted him to see defeat. I wanted him to see a man who was giving up. "Booker, listen to me," Jared said, his voice taking on a commanding, urgent tone. "You sound bad. You look terrible. You cannot stay in that house alone if you are sick." "I know," I whispered, closing my eyes. "I don't think I am going to make it, Jared. This winter, it feels like the last one. I just want Lucille to be happy. If I die, tell her I am sorry I was boring." No, don't talk like that," Jared said, but I could hear the excitement in his voice. He was trying to suppress it, but it was there. The jackpot. If I died natural causes, stress, heart failure, it would be so much easier for them. No messy divorce, no division of assets, just a clean inheritance. But he couldn't wait for me to die naturally. He had debts. Mrs. Higgins had told me about the cartel. He needed access to my money now. "Booker, listen," Jared said. "We can help you. Chantel and I, we can handle everything. The doctors, the pharmacy, the bills. But you need to let us help. You are in no condition to manage your finances right now." I opened one eye. What do you mean?" "You need to sign a power of attorney, Booker. Just a temporary one. Just so we can access your accounts to pay for your heart medication and fix the furnace. We can get a nurse to come to the house. We can take care of you. But you have to authorize us. Otherwise, the bank won't let us help you." The trap snapped shut. There it was. The power of attorney. The golden key. With that document, he could empty my savings, sell my stocks, and mortgage this house out from under me before I was even cold in the ground. I coughed again, long and hard, covering the phone so he wouldn't hear me, holding back a laugh of pure, bitter triumph. He was desperate. I suppose you are right, I wheezed. I don't want to die here alone in the cold. I will sign it. Anything. Just help me. Good. Good decision, Booker, Jared said. I will email the document to you. Can you print it? No printer, I lied. Ink is dry. Okay, don't panic, Jared said. I have a notary friend. He is in the neighborhood, actually, checking on another client. I can send him over with the papers. Today. Within the hour. Is the road clear? I looked out at the pristine snow. The road was impassable. But for a man greedy enough, he would find a way. The plow just came by. I lied again. It is clear enough for a 4x4. Perfect, Jared said. Stay put, Booker. Don't go to sleep. Do not go to sleep. Keep the phone on. We are saving you, okay? We are taking care of you. Thank you, son, I whispered. You are a good boy. He hung up. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of the kitchen, staring at my own reflection in the dark phone screen. I looked tired. I looked old. But in my eyes there was a spark that hadn't been there yesterday. He was sending a notary on a Sunday in a blizzard. That meant the notary was fake, or corrupt, probably one of his cronies. And Jared said he was in Florida, but he had a friend in the neighborhood ready to come over instantly. He was close. He was nearby. Watching. Waiting. I stood up. My knees didn't hurt anymore. The cold didn't bother me anymore. I had work to do. I walked to the hallway mirror. I straightened my collar. I needed to look like a victim. I needed to look like the sheep waiting for the wolves. But first I had to prepare the slaughterhouse. I went to the basement door. I unlocked it. The smell of sawdust and dry concrete rose up to greet me. My workshop. My kingdom. Jared thought he was sending someone to trick a senile old man into signing away his life. He didn't know he was sending them into a fortress built by a man who knew how to trap rats. I walked down the stairs into the darkness. I didn't turn on the light. I knew where every hammer, every saw, every nail was. I had about an hour. I rolled up my sleeves. The useless old man was about to go to work. But as I reached for my toolbox, a thought chilled me. If the notary was coming to the front door, who was watching the back? If Jared was close, he might try to move Lucille while I was distracted with the papers. I needed eyes in the back of my head. I pulled out my burner phone, the one I kept for emergencies, and dialed the number on the crumpled receipt from the grocery store. Mrs. Higgins answered on the first ring. "Hello," she said. Her voice was calm, steady. "It is Booker," I said. "You were right about the snow." "I know," she said. "They are coming," I told her. "They are bringing papers." "Do not sign anything," she said sharply. "I won't. But I need a favor. I need you to watch my backyard, from the alley. Can you see my shed from your second-floor window?" "I can," she said. "If you see anyone at all near that shed, do not call me, call the police, and tell them there is a kidnapping in progress." "I understand, Booker. Are you armed?" I looked at the wall where my nail gun hung. I looked at the heavy pipe wrench. I looked at the spool of high-tension wire. "I am a contractor, Mrs. Higgins," I said. "I am always armed." "Good luck," she said. "And Booker." "Yeah. Check the vents." The line went dead. "Check the vents." I frowned. What did she mean, check the vents? I looked up at the ceiling, at the heating vent, and then I saw it. A tiny glint of light inside the grate. A red eye. A camera. They had been watching me the whole time. They saw me sitting in the chair. They saw me sleeping. Did they see me talking to Mrs. Higgins just now? I froze. If they heard me call the police, the game was over. They would kill Lucille before the cops even started their cars. I had to think fast. I had to assume the camera had audio. I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the vent. I brought the phone back to my ear, pretending I was still talking. "Yes, Pizza Hut," I said loud and clear. "I would like to order a large pepperoni. The roads are clear." "Yes, please hurry. I am starving." I hung up. I looked at the vent and gave a weak, pathetic smile. "Pizza will be nice," I muttered to myself, shuffling towards the stairs. I hoped Jared was watching. I hoped he thought I was just a hungry, dying old fool. Because when that notary walked through my door, he wasn't going to find pizza. He was going to find out why you never corner a man who built the walls you are standing between. Night fell over Chicago like a heavy black curtain, and with it came the cold. The kind of cold that snaps iron and turns breath into ice crystals before it leaves your lips. I sat in the dark kitchen watching the digital clock on the microwave change numbers. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11. The house was silent, but it was a silence that screamed. I knew I had to move. I knew I could not wait until morning. If Jared's plan was moving as fast as that fake video call suggested, then every second I sat in this chair was a second closer to my own funeral. I stood up and my knees popped. I felt the weight of my 70 years, but I also felt the adrenaline of a man half my age. I walked to the mudroom and put on my heavy work boots. I zipped up my parka. I pulled a black knit cap low over my ears. Then I reached for the tool that had built half this neighborhood, my crowbar. It was 24 inches of hardened steel, cold and heavy in my grip. It was a tool for destruction, but tonight it was a tool for truth. I opened the back door. The wind had died down, but the air was still biting. The snow in the backyard glowed with a ghostly luminescence under the moonlight. I looked at the trail, that damnable trail leading to the shed. The drag marks were still there, frozen into the crust. The footprints alongside them were deep craters in the white surface. Mrs. Higgins' voice echoed in my head. "Don't touch the snow." I took a deep breath and stepped off the porch. I did not make a new path. I placed my boot directly into the first deep impression left by the person who had dragged the heavy load last night. It was a difficult way to walk. I had to stretch my stride to match theirs. I had to balance on the frozen ridges of their crime. I felt like a ghost haunting the steps of a killer. Step by step, I made my way across the yard. The wind bit at my exposed face. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that threatened to drown out the crunch of the frozen snow beneath me. I was terrified of what I would find in that shed. Was Lucille in there? Was she hurt? Was she gone? I reached the shed door. The padlock was still there, gleaming in the moonlight. A master lock, heavy duty. Jared thought this lock made him the owner of this space. He forgot that I was the one who framed these walls. I was the one who hung this door. I wedged the flat end of the crowbar between the hasp and the wood. I didn't want to cut the lock. That would be obvious. I wanted to pop the screws from the wood so I could put them back later if I needed to cover my tracks. I leaned my weight into the bar. Wood groaned, metal screeched, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet night. I froze, waiting for a light to flick on in a neighbor's window. Nothing. I pushed harder. With a sharp crack, the hasp pulled free from the frame. The lock hung uselessly. I opened the door just enough to slip inside. I pulled it shut behind me immediately to block the wind. The darkness inside was total. The air smelled wrong. It didn't smell like gasoline and sawdust like a tool shed should. It smelled like cheap perfume and ozone. I pulled a small flashlight from my pocket and clicked it on. The beam cut through the blackness. I braced myself for the sight of a body. I braced myself to see my wife lying on the cold concrete. But the beam of light didn't hit a person. It hit a wall of green. I blinked confusingly. I swept the light around the room. The interior of my shed had been transformed. The lawnmower and the snowblower had been shoved into a corner and covered with a tarp. In the center of the room, clearing a space of about 10 feet, was a professional setup. A large green screen fabric was draped over a frame against the back wall. 2 tripod lights stood on either side, battery-powered industrial LEDs. And in front of the green screen was a single white lounge chair, the same lounge chair I had seen in the video call this morning. I walked closer, my boots crunching on the concrete. I felt a wave of nausea. It was a film set. On a small folding table next to the chair lay a pile of clothes. I shone the light on them. Lucille's yellow sundress, her wide-brimmed straw hat, her oversized sunglasses, and a wig. A blonde wig styled exactly like Lucille's hair. I reached out and touched the wig. It was synthetic cold to the touch. My mind raced, putting the pieces together. The video hadn't been filmed last summer. It had been filmed right here, recently. Maybe even last night before they left. Or maybe... I shined the light on the floor. There were cigarette butts, Jared's brand, and empty cans of energy drinks. This wasn't just a deception. This was a production. They had planned this for weeks. They had turned my own property into a studio to fabricate my wife's existence. That meant Lucille wasn't in Florida. She wasn't even in the video. Someone else had worn that wig. Someone else had sat in that chair and waved at the camera while Jared added the pool background digitally. Chantel, my daughter, my own flesh and blood. She was the same size as her mother, with the hat and the glasses and the distance. Yes, it was Chantel. The betrayal hit me harder than the cold outside. They had worked together, father and daughter plotting to erase the mother and fool the father. I turned away from the green screen feeling sick. I swept the light over the rest of the room looking for, I didn't know what. A clue, a timeline. The light landed on a director's chair in the corner. Sitting on the canvas seat was a leather-bound notebook. I recognized it. It was Jared's idea journal. He carried it everywhere, claiming he was always coming up with the next big business venture. I picked it up. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. I opened it to the bookmark. The page was dated 2 months ago. The heading at the top was written in red ink, "The Asset Liquidation Strategy." I read the bullet points. Phase 1 isolation. Convince L to visit sister. Create distance. Phase 2. The departure. Stage a fight. Make B seem unreasonable and senile. Phase 3. The digital ghost. Pre-record proof of life videos. Use green screen in shed. Note, get wig. I flipped the page. My breath caught in my throat. Contingencies. Plan A. The missing person. Keep the digital ghost alive for 3 months. Then report L missing from Florida Beach. No body found. Wait 7 years for death certificate. Cons takes too long. Cash flow issues. Plan B. The accident. If B becomes suspicious or refuses power of attorney, stage an accident at the house. B has dementia. B leaves gas on. Explosion. Or B falls downstairs. Double funeral. Pros immediate payout on both life insurance policies. House sells faster as a teardown. I stared at the words. Plan B. I wasn't just an obstacle to them. I was a target. Accident due to dementia. Explosion. They were going to kill me. They were going to blow up the house with me inside and blame it on my old age. I closed the book. I shoved it into the deep pocket of my parka. This was it. This was the gun they hadn't fired yet. I needed to get out of here. I needed to get this book to Mrs. Higgins. I needed to get to the police station. I turned towards the door, and then I froze. Through the thin wooden walls of the shed, I heard a sound. A low rumble. An engine. I clicked off my flashlight, instantly plunging myself back into darkness. I crept to the small window on the side of the shed. It was caked with grime, but I could see through a scratch in the glass. Twin beams of light cut through the falling snow in the driveway. A car had just pulled up. A large, dark SUV. Jared's SUV. My heart stopped. They weren't supposed to be back. He said he was in Florida. Even if he was lying, he shouldn't be here at midnight in a blizzard, unless they came back to clean up. The headlights died. The doors opened. I saw 2 figures step out into the storm. Even in the dark, I recognized them. Jared's bulky frame in his expensive coat, and Chantel huddled next to him. They didn't go to the front door. They walked around to the trunk. Jared opened it. He pulled out something long and heavy wrapped in a dark blanket. He didn't walk towards the house. He turned and looked straight towards the backyard, straight towards the shed. I pressed my back against the cold wall of the shed, gripping the crowbar until my knuckles ached. They were coming here, and they were carrying something they didn't want the world to see. I was trapped. If I went out the door, I would run right into them. If I stayed, I would be discovered. And I had the notebook in my pocket, the notebook that gave them a motive for murder. I heard the crunch of boots on snow. They were using the same path I had used, walking in the footprints. They were getting closer. I looked around the dark room frantically. The green screen, the tarp covering the lawnmower. There was nowhere to hide. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. I heard Jared's voice muffled by the wood, but clear enough to chill my blood. Hurry up, Chantel. My hands are freezing. Let's dump this and get inside. The old man is probably asleep, but we can't take chances. I hate this, Jared, Chantel whimpered. I hate this place. Shut up. Just hold the light. I need to unlock it. I gripped the crowbar. I held my breath. I watched the door handle turn. I realized with a jolt of horror that I had pried the hasp loose, but I hadn't put it back. The lock was hanging there broken. Jared was going to know someone was inside before he even opened the door. The handle jiggled, then stopped. What the hell? Jared's voice was sharp. Silence. Then, the lock is broken. I tightened my grip on the steel bar. I wasn't an old man anymore. I was a cornered animal, and I wasn't going to die in the dark. The door creaked open. The hinges of the shed door screamed as Jared kicked it open. That sound was my salvation. The screech of metal on metal masked the crunch of my boots as I pushed off the back wall and sprinted toward the house. I did not look back. I ran with the desperation of a man who knows the executioner is sharpening the blade. I stayed low, keeping to the shadows of the oak trees I had planted 30 years ago, using their thick trunks to shield me from the driveway. My lungs burned in the freezing air, but I forced myself to move faster. I hit the back porch steps and slipped inside the kitchen, locking the door with trembling hands. I had seconds, maybe less. I tore off my parka and threw it into the mudroom hamper, burying it under a pile of dirty towels. I kicked off my boots and shoved them deep into the corner behind the washing machine. I ran to the living room and threw myself into my armchair, grabbing the newspaper I had left on the floor. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to break the cage. I forced my breathing to slow down. In, out, in, out. I needed to look like I had been sitting there all evening. Then the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was an assault. Someone was hammering on my front door with enough force to rattle the stained glass window. Dad. Dad opened the door. "Oh my God, please be okay." It was Chantel. Her voice was pitched high, hysterical. A perfect performance. I did not move immediately. An old man does not sprint to the door. I counted to 5. Then I stood up, dragging my legs, slightly feigning the stiffness of age, and walked to the entryway. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Jared and Chantel practically fell into the hallway. They were covered in snow, their faces flushed. But it wasn't from the cold. It was the flush of actors who had just taken the stage for the climax of their play. Thank God. Chantel sobbed, throwing her arms around my neck. Her coat was wet and cold, but her skin was hot. She smelled of fear and menthol cigarettes. "What is going on?" I asked, pulling away from her. "Why are you back? You are supposed to be in Florida." Jared stepped forward. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, scanning the hallway, scanning the stairs. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield, ensuring his troops were in position. "Lucille called us Booker." Jared said, his voice grave. He pulled a face of deep concern, but his eyes were hard as flint. "She called us from the airport bathroom. She was crying Booker. She said you threatened her." I stared at him. The audacity of the lie took my breath away. "Threatened her?" I asked. "She said you had a knife." Jared continued, stepping closer, forcing me to back up into the living room. "She said you were waving a butcher knife around, saying you would rather see her dead than let her leave. She was terrified. We had to turn the car around. We tried to call you, but you didn't answer." I looked at the phone on the side table. The line was dead. They must have cut the connection from the box outside. "You are lying," I said quietly. My voice was steady, but inside I was reeling. This was Plan B. The accident hadn't worked, so they were moving to the lunatic husband. "Don't do this." "Dad," Chantel wept, wiping her eyes. "Mom is scared to death. She is hiding at the terminal. She said you have been forgetting things, getting violent. She said you hurt her arm yesterday." I looked at my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had taught to ride a bike. I looked for a shred of shame in her eyes, but I found none. Only a desperate need to please her husband. "I have never laid a hand on your mother in 40 years, I said, my voice rising. "And she isn't at the airport. She is—" I stopped. If I said she was in the shed, I would have to explain how I knew. I would have to admit I went outside. And right now my boots were the only thing linking me to that backyard. She is where Booker Jared challenged stepping into my personal space. "Where is she? Did you do something to her? Is that why the house is so quiet?" Suddenly the room was washed in red and blue light. The strobe effect bounced off the walls, creating a disorienting, chaotic rhythm. Sirens wailed, cutting through the muffled silence of the snowstorm. "You called the police," I whispered. "We had to," Jared said, "for your own safety. And hers." The front door, which was still ajar, was pushed open. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, their hands resting near their holsters. Snow blew in behind them. "Police. We got a call about a domestic disturbance involving a weapon. It was Officer Miller." "Officer." I knew him. He was a good kid. I had fixed his father's garage door last summer. But tonight he didn't look at me like a neighbor. He looked at me like a suspect. "Booker," he said, stepping forward. "Is everything okay here?" "Officer Miller," I said, holding my hands up, palms open. "These two are lying. My wife left for Florida hours ago. They are trying to—" "He has a weapon, officer," Jared shouted, cutting me off. "He has a bat. He hit the wall with it. He was screaming about smashing everything." I turned to look at Jared. "You are insane. I don't have a bat. I haven't played baseball since 1995. Officer Miller looked at me, then at Jared. "Sir, where is the weapon now?" "I think he hid it in his closet," Jared said quickly, pointing towards the hallway. "I saw him running out of the bedroom when we pulled up. He was trying to hide something. This was the trap. I saw the jaws closing, but I was powerless to stop it. If I resisted, I was the violent, angry black man they painted me to be. If I stayed silent, I was compliant. You can check the closet." "Officer," I said, keeping my voice calm, "there is nothing there but my suits." Miller nodded to his partner, a younger officer I didn't recognize. "Check it. Keep eyes on him." The partner moved down the hallway. I stood there surrounded by my family and the law, feeling like a stranger in my own life. Chantel was still sobbing quietly, a soft, rhythmic sound that grated on my nerves. Jared was pacing, running a hand through his hair, acting the part of the distressed protector. "Officer Miller," I said, "listen to me. Check the flight manifests. Check the airport cameras. My wife is not there. We will check everything." Booker Miller said, his tone placating. "Just relax. Let's get this sorted out." From the bedroom, I heard a noise. A clatter. Then the young officer's voice. "Got it." My stomach dropped. The officer walked back into the living room. In his gloved hand, he held a wooden baseball bat. It was an old Louisville Slugger one I hadn't seen in decades, but it wasn't dusty. The barrel of the bat was stained dark red, and there was something sticky on the handle. I stared at it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "That isn't mine," I said, my voice sounding hollow. "That was never there." "Jesus Christ," Jared yelled, recoiling in fake horror. "Is that blood?" "Oh my God, Chantel, don't look." Chantel screamed, a piercing sound that made Miller flinch. "Mom! He killed Mom! Booker Washington, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Miller's voice was no longer friendly. It was steel. "Miller, listen to me," I pleaded. "Look at the blood. It is fresh. How could it be fresh if she left hours ago? Look at the bat. It is a plant. Turn around. Now." He grabbed my arm, spinning me around. I felt the cold metal of the handcuffs bite into my wrists. The click of the ratchet was the loudest sound in the room. "You are making a mistake," I said as he pushed me towards the door. "They want my money, Miller. They are doing this for the money. Read him his rights," Miller told his partner. Jared stepped into my path as they led me out. He looked heartbroken. He looked devastated. He reached out and touched my shoulder, a gesture that looked like comfort to the officers, but felt like a brand to me. "I am so sorry, Booker," he said loud enough for the cops to hear. "We will get you help. We will get you the best doctors." Then he leaned in close. His lips brushed my ear. The cops were busy navigating the snowy steps. Chantel was wailing in the background. "Don't worry, old man," he whispered, his voice a snake's hiss. "The asylum has great heating, and by the time you get out, this house will be a parking lot." He pulled back his face, a mask of tragedy. "Take care of him, officer, please. He doesn't know what he is doing." I was shoved into the back of the cruiser. The hard plastic seat was freezing. I watched through the wire mesh as Jared put his arm around Chantel and led her back into my house, into my warmth. As the car pulled away, sliding slightly on the unplowed road, I saw the upstairs light flicker on. My bedroom light. They weren't wasting any time. They were already looking for the deed. They were looking for the bank books. But they had forgotten one thing. The notebook. I shifted my weight, pressing my hip against the seat. The hard edge of Jared's journal was still in my pocket. The police hadn't searched me thoroughly yet. They just did a quick pat-down for weapons. They missed the book inside the thick parka lining. I looked out at the snow swirling in the red and blue lights. "You think you won, Jared," I thought. "You think you put the old dog in the pound, but you forgot that this old dog knows how to dig, and I wasn't going to the asylum. I was going to war." The holding cell smelled of bleach and stale sweat, a combination that stuck to the back of my throat and refused to leave. I sat on the metal bench, my elbows resting on my knees, my head in my hands. The cold from the steel seeped through my trousers, chilling bones that were already freezing from the inside out. I had been processed like a common criminal, fingerprinted, photographed, my shoelaces removed so I wouldn't hang myself, my belt taken so I couldn't use it as a weapon. I was a 70-year-old man who had built half the foundations in this precinct, and now I was sitting in a cage like a rabid dog. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. I replayed the scene in the living room over and over. The fake blood on the bat, the tears Chantel forced out, the way Jared touched my shoulder with that mocking sympathy. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and I had walked right into it. I had underestimated them. I thought I was the hunter because I had found the notebook, but they had been hunting me long before I even knew I was prey. Washington, front and center. The guard, a young man with a tired face, tapped his baton on the bars. "You get one call. Make it count." I stood up, my joints popping. I walked to the heavy door as it buzzed open. I knew who I should call. My lawyer. A man I had paid retainers to for 20 years. But he was a corporate lawyer. He handled contracts and zoning permits. He didn't handle domestic violence charges. And worse, he was friends with Jared. They played golf together. If I called him, he would tell me to calm down, to cooperate, to sign the papers Jared wanted. I walked to the wall phone. My hand went to my pocket, searching for my wallet. Then I remembered they had taken my wallet. They had taken everything, except for the crumpled pieces of paper in my back pocket, which they deemed trash. I pulled out the wad of receipts. The grocery store receipt from yesterday, the one I had paid for Mrs. Higgins. I smoothed it out on the metal shelf. The ink was faded, but I could still see the items: bread, milk, cat food, and at the bottom where the loyalty points were tallied, there was a handwritten number. She must have scribbled it there when I wasn't looking. When I was swiping my card, "When your wife leaves, do not touch the snow." She knew everything before it happened. I dialed the number. My fingers felt clumsy on the keypad. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I held my breath. If she didn't answer, I was alone. Truly alone. Washington residence. The voice was crisp, clear, and sharp. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, my voice raspy. "It is Booker, the man from the store." "I have been expecting your call, Mr. Washington," she said. There was no surprise in her voice, no hesitation, just a calm certainty that made my knees weak with relief. "They arrested me," I said. "They said I threatened my wife. They planted a bat." I know, she cut me off. "Domestic violence charge. Class A misdemeanor to start, but they will upgrade it to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. They want you held without bail until the arraignment, which won't be until Tuesday because of the storm." How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because that is the script, Booker. It is always the script. Listen to me carefully. Do not say another word to the police. Do not try to explain. Do not try to defend yourself. Silence is your only shield right now. I am on my way. But sit down, Booker, and wait for the cavalry." The line went dead. I was led back to the cell. I sat there for an hour staring at the graffiti scratched into the paint on the opposite wall. Doubt began to creep in. Who was this woman? A random old lady from the grocery store. What could she do against a system that had already decided I was guilty? Jared had played the part of the concerned son-in-law perfectly. The cops believed him. Then the door to the holding area opened. It didn't just open, it flew open. I heard the desk sergeant's voice raised in protest. "Ma'am, you cannot go back there. This is a restricted area." And then I heard her voice. It wasn't the whisper I heard in the store. It was a boom, a gavel striking wood. "Sergeant Miller, if you do not step aside, I will have your badge on my desk before the ink on your report is dry. And tell Chief Stevens that if he is holding my client on a trumped-up charge based on the testimony of a known con artist, he better have his pension sorted out, because I will sue this department into the Stone Age." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Footsteps approached my cell. Rapid, authoritative clicks of heels on concrete. Mrs. Higgins appeared in front of the bars. She looked nothing like the fragile woman in the coat. She was wearing a tailored black wool suit. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She wore pearl earrings that caught the harsh fluorescent light. But it was her eyes that had changed. The cataracts were still there, but the gaze behind them was lethal. "Open this gate," she commanded without looking at the guard. The guard scrambled for his keys. His hands were shaking. He unlocked the door and swung it open. Mrs. Higgins looked at me. She didn't smile. She looked me up and down, assessing the damage. "Get your things, Mr. Washington. We are leaving." "But—" "The bail," I stammered. "The charges." "Already posted," she said, "and I have filed a motion for an emergency evidentiary hearing regarding the validity of the witness statements. You are released on your own recognizance into my custody." I walked out of the cell feeling like I was in a dream. As we passed the front desk, I saw Officer Miller. He looked pale. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mrs. Higgins stopped at the desk. She slapped a file folder down on the counter. "Copy of the release order. Ann Miller." "Yes, Your Honor," Miller squeaked. "Your Honor." The words echoed in my head. "If I find out that you or anyone in this precinct leaked Mr. Washington's arrest to the press or to his family before I authorized it, I will make sure you are directing traffic in the middle of a blizzard for the rest of your career. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear, Judge Higgins." Judge. She was a judge. We walked out into the cold night air. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind was still howling. A black town car was waiting at the curb, engine running. A driver opened the back door. "Get in, Booker," she said, her voice softening slightly. "We have work to do." I sank into the leather seat. The warmth of the car wrapped around me. I looked at the woman sitting next to me. "You are a judge," I said. "Retired," she corrected. "Superior Court. 25 years on the bench. I retired 5 years ago. Or at least I tried to." "Why?" I asked. "Why help me? You don't even know me." She turned to face me. Her expression was grim. "I don't know you, Booker, but I know your son-in-law. Or should I say, I know Jared Vance, although that is not the name he used when he stood in my courtroom 10 years ago." My blood ran cold. "Who is he?" She didn't answer immediately. The car pulled away from the curb, navigating the snowy streets with ease. We drove in silence for 20 minutes, leaving the city center and heading towards the historic district where the old money lived. The houses here were mansions set back from the road behind iron gates. We pulled into a driveway that had been plowed perfectly clear. The house was a fortress of stone and ivy. Inside it smelled of old paper and lemon polish. The walls were lined with books from floor to ceiling. She led me into a study. A fire was crackling in the hearth. She pointed to a leather armchair. "Sit. Brandy." It wasn't a question. She poured 2 glasses of dark amber liquid and handed me one. Then she walked to a large oak desk and picked up a thick file folder. She dropped it on the coffee table in front of me. It landed with a heavy thud. 10 years ago, she began sitting opposite me, taking a sip of her drink. I presided over a divorce case. A young woman from a wealthy family was suing for annulment. She claimed her husband had defrauded her family, drained her trust fund, and then tried to have her committed to a mental institution to gain control of her remaining assets. I stared at her. The pattern. It was the same pattern. His name was Julian Thorne. Then she continued. "But when I saw him pick up your wife yesterday, when I saw the way he looked at your house, I knew it was him. A predator changes his name Booker, but he never changes his stripes." She opened the file. It was full of mugshots, financial records, and surveillance photos. And there in the middle was a younger Jared. He looked the same shark-like smile. "I let him go," she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. "Technicality. The evidence was circumstantial. He had covered his tracks well. He walked out of my courtroom with half that girl's money and a smirk that has haunted me for a decade. I swore that if I ever saw him again, I would nail him to the wall." She leaned forward. "But this time, Booker, it is different. This time he is not just greedy, he is desperate." She pulled out a separate sheet of paper. It looked like a credit report, but it was marked with red flags. "My contacts in the district attorney's office ran a deep background check on him after I saw you at the store. Jared isn't just a failed stockbroker, he is a gambler, a bad one. He got involved with the wrong people. High-stakes underground poker rings run by the Velasquez cartel. The cartel. The word hung in the air like smoke. He owes them $500,000, Booker. And the deadline was yesterday. That is why he was so frantic. That is why he needed your wife out of the way. That is why he needs your power of attorney. He doesn't want your house to live in. He needs to sell it immediately. A quick cash sale to a developer. He needs the liquidity to save his own life." I looked at the photos of Jared. I saw the desperation I had missed, the sweat on his brow, the manic energy. "He is cornered," I whispered. "Exactly," Mrs. Higgins said. "And a cornered rat is the most dangerous animal on earth. He has already kidnapped your wife. He has already framed you. He thinks you are locked away in a cell where you can't hurt him. He thinks he has won." She reached into the folder and pulled out a set of keys. House keys. "But he made a mistake," she said. "He forgot that in Chicago we look out for our own. And he forgot that I never close a case until justice is served." She looked at me, her eyes blazing. "You can't go home, Booker. The restraining order means if you step foot within 500 feet of that house, you will be arrested again, and this time I won't be able to get you out. He has cleared the board. He has the house. He has the girl. He has the police on his side." "Then what do we do?" I asked, gripping the glass. "How do I save Lucille? How do I stop him?" Mrs. Higgins smiled, a slow, cold smile that terrified me more than Jared ever could. "We don't stop him, Booker. We help him. We let him think everything is going according to plan. We let him think he has won. And then when he steps forward to claim his prize..." She picked up a photo of my house. "We pull the floor out from under him." She handed me the keys. "These are for the guest cottage in the back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we are going to turn your house into a mousetrap, and Jared Vance is going to walk right into it." I looked at the keys, then at the file. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "He has my wife," I said, standing up. Mrs. Higgins nodded. "And we are going to get her back. But first we have to make him bleed." I finished the brandy in one swallow. It burned going down. "Let's get to work, Judge." The guest cottage behind Mrs. Higgins' estate was warmer than my cell had been, but I could not stop shivering. It was a cold that came from the marrow of my bones, born of fear and fury. I paced the small room like a caged animal. Mrs. Higgins sat at a small wooden table sipping tea, her eyes following my every move. "Booker, you are going to wear a hole in my rug," she said gently. "Sit down. We need to think." "I cannot sit," I snapped, then immediately regretted my tone. "I am sorry, Judge, but my wife is out there. Jared has her, and if he was willing to frame me for assault, he is willing to do worse to her. We know she is not in Florida," Mrs. Higgins said, "and we know she is not in the shed. So the question remains, where do you hide a woman who is supposed to be on a beach in Miami?" I stopped pacing. I closed my eyes and forced myself to go back to that morning, to the view from my kitchen window. I stripped away the anger and the panic and looked at the scene with the eyes of a contractor. I looked at the ground, the snow. I opened my eyes. "The tracks," I said. "What tracks?" Mrs. Higgins asked, setting her cup down. "In the backyard," I said, pacing faster now as the memory sharpened. There were the drag marks to the shed, and the footprints. But earlier, before the snow fully covered everything, I saw something else near the alley gate. I thought it was just the garbage truck at first. But the garbage runs on Tuesdays. Yesterday was Sunday. I grabbed a napkin and a pen from the table. I drew a crude sketch. Jared drives a luxury SUV. It has wide tires but a standard wheelbase. The tracks I saw near the back gate were different. They were dualies, double rear tires, like a box truck or a heavy-duty van. "A moving van," Mrs. Higgins suggested. "No," I shook my head. "Too small for a moving van, too big for a pickup. It was a transport vehicle. And it was heavy. The ruts were deep even in the frozen ground." Mrs. Higgins picked up her phone. She dialed a number. "David, bring the laptop and the access codes. We have a lead." 5 minutes later, a man in his 40s walked in. He looked nothing like his mother. He wore a faded hoodie and glasses thick as bottle bottoms. This was David. I knew him by reputation. He wasn't just an IT guy. He worked cybersecurity for the city. He was the kind of man who could find a needle in a haystack if the needle had an IP address. "Mom, you know I can lose my job for this," David said, opening a sleek silver laptop on the table. "And you know I can write you out of the will," Mrs. Higgins shot back without missing a beat. "Just find the vehicle, David." Booker says there was a heavy transport vehicle in the alley behind 4th Street between midnight and 4 a.m. Sunday night. David sighed, but his fingers were already flying across the keyboard. He didn't hack into the Pentagon. He didn't have to. He just logged into the city's traffic management system, the cameras that watched every intersection for red light runners and speeding tickets. "Okay, let's see," David muttered. 4th Street alley entrance, camera 402. The screen flickered. Grainy black and white footage appeared. Snow was falling diagonally across the frame, making it hard to see. David scrubbed through the timeline. There, Mrs. Higgins pointed a manicured fingernail at the screen. "Stop." At 2:15 a.m., a dark shape pulled out of my alley. It wasn't Jared's SUV, it was a white van, the kind with no windows in the back. "Can you get the plate?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. David tapped a few keys, enhancing the image. The license plate was covered in snow mud, unreadable. "Damn," I swore. "Wait," David said. "Look at the side." He zoomed in on the door of the van. There was a logo. It was faded and peeling but legible. "Sunny Pines Medical Transport." "Sunny Pines," Mrs. Higgins whispered, and her face went pale. "Oh, dear God." What I asked. "What is Sunny Pines?" "It is a warehouse for the unwanted Booker," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "It is a nursing home in the industrial district near the airport. We used to see cases from there all the time when I was on the bench. Neglect. Abuse. It is where people dump their relatives when they want to forget they exist, but don't want to pay for real care." My stomach turned over. Lucille. My Lucille, who wouldn't sleep on sheets unless they were Egyptian cotton. "David, track that van," Mrs. Higgins commanded. I watched the screen as David followed the van from camera to camera. It was a digital breadcrumb trail. The van left my neighborhood, hopped on the I-90, and headed west. It exited near the rail yards. The final shot showed the van turning into a gated compound surrounded by chain-link fences topped with razor wire. The sign above the gate was missing half its letters. Uni Nes Care Cienter. It looked less like a nursing home and more like a minimum security prison. "That is where she is," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He put her there." "Why?" Mrs. Higgins asked. "That is the question. Why not just leave her in the shed? Why move her?" "Because he needs her alive," I realized. The thought hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. He faked the video because he needed me to think she was happy, but he moved her there because he needs to keep her on ice. On ice for what David asked. For the signature, Mrs. Higgins said, realizing it at the same time I did. She pulled out the file on Jared again. "The house deed," she said. "It is in both your names, right, Booker?" "Yes," I said. "Joint tenancy. That means he can't sell it without both signatures. He tried to get your power of attorney to bypass you, but he already has hers." "How?" I asked. "Lucille would never sell the house. She loved that house. She complained about it, but it was her kingdom." "Booker think," Mrs. Higgins said. "Did she sign anything recently?" "Anything at all." I thought back. The weeks leading up to this, Jared coming over for dinner, bringing wine, laughing. "He brought papers last week," I said slowly. "He said it was for tax purposes. He said he could save us money on property taxes if we transferred the title to a trust. He said it was just a formality." "And did you sign it?" Mrs. Higgins asked. "No," I said. "I told him I wanted my lawyer to look at it first. He got angry. He said I didn't trust him. But Lucille..." I felt sick. I saw the memory clearly now. Lucille sitting at the dining table sipping wine. Jared smiling at her, handing her a pen. "Oh, Booker, you are so paranoid," she had said. "It is just taxes." And she signed. "She didn't sign a tax document," Mrs. Higgins said grimly. "She signed a quitclaim deed, or a transfer of power. She signed away her half of the house to him or to Chantel. But she is still alive," I said. "Exactly," Mrs. Higgins said. "If she dies too soon, it triggers an investigation, probate court, delays. But if she is alive but incapacitated, say in a cheap nursing home suffering from sudden onset dementia, then her legal guardian controls the asset." "He declared her incompetent," I said. "That is why she is there. He dumped her in a hole so no one would hear her scream that she isn't crazy. He scammed her," Mrs. Higgins said softly. "He played on her greed and her vanity. He probably promised her that the tax savings would pay for that Florida trip. And the moment the ink was dry, she became a liability." I stood up. I went to the closet and grabbed my coat. "Where are you going?" Mrs. Higgins asked. "I am going to get my wife," I said. "You can't just walk in there," Booker David warned. "That place is locked down, and you are a fugitive." "I don't care," I said, zipping up my coat. "I built walls for a living son. I know how to take them down." Mrs. Higgins stood up. She didn't try to stop me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small black device. "Take this," she said. "It is a recorder. If you find her, I want you to get her saying she didn't know what she was signing. I want her on tape saying she was tricked. That is how we bury him." I took the recorder. "I will drive you," Mrs. Higgins said. "No," I said. "You have done enough. I don't want you involved in a break-in." "I am not driving you to break in," she said with a small smile. "I am driving you to visit an old friend. I happen to be on the board of inspectors for state facilities. I think it is time for a surprise inspection." I looked at this woman, this small, fierce woman who had saved my life. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet," she said, putting on her coat. The hard part is telling a woman who thought she was a queen that she has been played for a pawn. We walked out to the car. The snow had stopped, but the air was still deadly cold. As we drove towards the industrial district, the city changed. The nice houses disappeared, replaced by warehouses and abandoned factories. The streetlights were broken. We pulled up to the gate of Sunny Pines. It looked even worse than on the camera. The windows were barred. The walls were stained. Mrs. Higgins rolled down the window. She flashed a badge I didn't know she still had. State inspection opened the gate. She barked at the sleepy guard. The guard scrambled. The gate rolled open. We drove up to the main entrance. "Ready, Booker?" she asked. I touched the crowbar I had hidden inside my coat. "Ready," I said. "Let's go find Lucille." The smell hit me the moment the automatic doors slid open. It was not the smell of medicine or cleanliness. It was the smell of despair. It was a cocktail of stale urine, boiled cabbage, and industrial-strength bleach, trying to cover up the scent of dying. Mrs. Higgins marched in front of me, her heels clicking on the cracked linoleum floor like gunshots. She held her badge high like a shield. I walked a step behind her, my hand inside my coat gripping the cold steel of the crowbar. I kept my head down, pulling my hat lower. I was not Booker Washington the fugitive. I was just an assistant. A shadow. The lobby was empty except for a reception desk behind a wall of plexiglass that was yellowed with age. A man sat there watching a small TV. He looked up surprised to see two people who looked like they actually bathed. He was big, with a neck that spilled over his collar. He wore a name tag that said Manager Stone. I knew that name. Mrs. Higgins had mentioned it in the car. Stone went to high school with Jared. They were cut from the same rotten cloth. "Can I help you?" Stone asked, not bothering to stand up. "Visiting hours are over." State inspection. Mrs. Higgins barked, slamming her hand on the counter. "We have a report of code violations. Open the secure wing, now." Stone laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Lady, do you know what time it is? Come back in the morning. Or better yet, don't come back at all. We are private." Mrs. Higgins leaned in close to the glass. "Mr. Stone, I can come back in the morning with a warrant and a SWAT team, or you can open that door and let us do a 10-minute walkthrough. If you make me call the district attorney, I promise you that you will be inspecting the inside of a cell by sunrise." Stone hesitated. He looked at her badge. He looked at her suit. He looked at me. I stared back, my face a mask of stone. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was just another old black man. Invisible. "Fine," he grunted. He buzzed the door. "But the East Wing is quarantined. Flu outbreak. You can't go in there." Mrs. Higgins walked through the door. I followed. As we passed the desk, she whispered to me without moving her lips. "Find her Booker. I will keep him busy at the nurse's station. You have 5 minutes." I nodded and peeled off to the right, down a dark hallway. The East Wing. Quarantine my foot. That was where they kept the problems. That was where they kept the secrets. The hallway was dimly lit. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets. I looked at the room numbers. 102, 104, 106. The doors were solid metal with small observation windows. This wasn't a nursing home, it was a holding pen. I moved fast, my boots silent on the tile. I looked through the windows. An old man tied to a bed, screaming silently. A woman curled in a ball on the floor. It was a house of horrors. Then I saw room 112. There was no name on the door. Just a clipboard hanging from a hook. I snatched it. Patient Doe. Female. 60s. Admitted Sunday 11 p.m. Transfer from private residence. Authorized by Guardian J. Vance. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked through the glass. The room was tiny. A cell. There was a single metal cot bolted to the floor. And on it lay a figure. It was Lucille. But it wasn't the Lucille who had left my house yesterday in a silk dress. This woman was wearing a gray hospital gown that was 2 sizes too big. Her hair, her beautiful hair that she spent hundreds of dollars maintaining, was matted and wild. She was strapped to the bed. Leather restraints bound her wrists and ankles. "Lucille," I whispered, pressing my hand against the cold glass. She didn't move. Her chest barely rose. She was sedated. Heavily. I tried the door handle. Locked. Of course. I looked down the hall. Stone was arguing with Mrs. Higgins. His back was to me, but a large orderly was walking towards me from the other end of the hall. He was carrying a tray of food. He saw me. "Hey!" he shouted. "You can't be down here!" I didn't hesitate. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain. I turned and ran. Not back towards the lobby, but towards the fire exit at the end of the hall. The orderly dropped the tray and chased me. He was younger, faster. But he didn't know the building codes. I did. I hit the push bar on the emergency exit. The alarm shrieked, a piercing wail that filled the entire building. Good. Let them come. Chaos was my cover. I burst out into the night. The cold air slapped my face. I was in a small courtyard surrounded by high fences. Snow was piled high against the walls. I ran along the side of the building, counting the windows. 112. There. The window was high up, barred with wire mesh. Security glass. Tough to break. But I wasn't just a man with a hammer. I was a man who knew stress points. I pulled the crowbar from my coat. I didn't swing it wildly. I jammed the pointed end into the corner of the frame where the mesh met the brick. I leveraged my weight. All 70 years of pain and anger. The brick crumbled. The anchor point gave way. I ripped the mesh screen back, bending the metal like it was cardboard. Now the glass. I wrapped my hand in my scarf. I aimed for the bottom corner. One sharp strike. Pop! The safety glass shattered into 1,000 diamonds falling onto the snow. I reached in and unlocked the latch. I pushed the window up. I climbed in. It was a tight squeeze. My coat snagged, but I pulled through, tumbling onto the floor of the room. The smell inside was worse than the hall. Urine and sweat. I scrambled to the bed. "Lucille," I hissed. "Lucille, baby, wake up!" She moaned. Her eyes fluttered open, but they were glassy, unseeing. "Who?" she mumbled. "Who is there?" "It is me, Lucille. It is Booker." "Booker," she slurred. You are dead," Jared said. "You died." He lied. I said, my hands working fast on the leather straps. My fingers were stiff with cold, but I undid the buckles. He lied about everything. "We are going home." I pulled her up. She was dead weight. Her legs wouldn't hold her. She was limp like a rag doll. "I can't walk," she whispered. "My legs, I know I said." I crouched down my back, protesting. "Put your arms around my neck." I hoisted her up. She was heavier than I remembered, or maybe I was just older, but as her weight settled onto my back, I felt a surge of strength. This was my wife. This was the woman I had carried across the threshold 40 years ago. I would carry her through hell if I had to. The door to the room shook. Someone was trying to unlock it from the hallway. "Open up!" Stone yelled from the other side. "I know you are in there." I looked at the window. It was high, too high to lift her out easily. "Booker," she wept into my ear. "I am scared." "Hold on tight," I grunted. I climbed onto the radiator, then onto the sill. The wind howled through the broken glass. I pushed her through, feet first, easing her down onto the snowbank outside. It was a soft landing. Then I squeezed through myself, dropping down beside her. I scooped her up again into my arms this time, carrying her bridal style. I trudged through the knee-deep snow towards the back gate. The alarm was still ringing, drowning out the sound of my ragged breathing. I saw headlights. Mrs. Higgins. She had driven the car around back. She knew. She always knew. The back gate was locked with a chain. I didn't have time to pick it. I set Lucille down in the snow for 1 second. I raised the crowbar high over my head and brought it down on the padlock. 1 strike. 2. The lock shattered. I kicked the gate open. Mrs. Higgins' car was there, engine idling. The back door flew open. "Get in," she yelled. I lifted Lucille one last time and slid her onto the leather seat. I dove in after her, slamming the door. "Go!" I yelled. The tires spun on the ice, then caught traction. We fish-railed out of the alley just as the back door of the facility burst open and Stone ran out, flashing a flashlight into the empty darkness. We sped away into the night, leaving the prison behind. In the back seat, I pulled Lucille onto my lap. I wrapped my coat around her shivering body. She was shaking violently now, the drugs wearing off enough for the shock to set in. She looked up at me. Her face was bruised. Her lip was cut. "Booker," she sobbed, clutching my shirt. He He told me it was an investment. He said if I signed the paper, we could save 40% on taxes. He said he would use the savings to send us to Europe. I know, baby, I whispered, stroking her matted hair. I know. And then, she gasped, for air tears streaming down her face, mixing with the dirt. Then he drove me here. He said it was a spa, a pre-flight spa treatment. And then the men came. And the needles. She buried her face in my chest, wailing, a sound of pure broken heartbreak. I am sorry, Booker. I am so sorry. I called you boring. I called you useless. I was so stupid. I just wanted to be special. You are special, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You are my wife. She looked at me, her eyes clearing for a moment. He said, you were dead, Booker. He told me you had a heart attack after I left. He said I had to stay here until the funeral. I tightened my arms around her. I am not dead, Lucille. I am very much alive, and he is going to wish he was the one in the ground. Mrs. Higgins looked in the rearview mirror. Her eyes met mine. Where to, she asked. The safe house, I said. We need to get her cleaned up. We need to get this on tape. And then I said, looking out at the passing streetlights, my anger burning hotter than ever. And then we invite my son-in-law over for a visit. Lucille shivered against me, but it wasn't from the cold anymore. She was safe. But as I looked at her broken form, I knew that saving her wasn't enough. Justice wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel what she felt. I wanted him to feel the cold, the fear, the helplessness. I looked at the recorder in my pocket. Rest up, Lucille, I whispered. Tomorrow you have a starring role in one last video. The safe house was not a house at all. It was a fortress buried beneath the foundation of an old brownstone in the Gold Coast district, owned by a man Mrs. Higgins simply called the Colonel. We entered through a service door in the alley that looked like it led to a boiler room but opened into a climate-controlled sanctuary of vintage wine and silence. The air was cool and smelled of cork and old oak barrels. It was the kind of silence that money buys, the kind of silence that keeps the world and its sirens at bay. I laid Lucille on a leather sofa in the tasting room. She was still shivering, not from cold, but from the aftershocks of trauma. Mrs. Higgins covered her with a cashmere blanket and began to clean the cuts on her face with the tenderness of a mother and the efficiency of a field medic. I stood in the corner watching them. My hands were still dirty from the shed, my coat still damp from the snow, but my mind was as clear as the crystal decanters on the shelf. We should call the police now, David said, pacing the small room, his laptop tucked under his arm. We have the witness, we have the recording. We can nail him, Booker. I shook my head slowly. No. If we call them now, Jared gets a lawyer. He claims it was a misunderstanding. He claims Lucille has dementia and wandered off. He claims the nursing home was for her own good. He is slippery, David. He has wriggled out of nets tighter than this. Mrs. Higgins looked up from tending to Lucille. She met my gaze, and I saw the steel in her eyes that had put criminals away for decades. Booker is right, she said. The law is a blunt instrument. Jared is a surgeon of lies. We need to catch him with the scalpel in his hand. I walked over to the heavy wooden table where my burner phone lay. I looked at it as if it were a detonator. He needs the house, I said. He needs it tonight. If he doesn't pay the cartel by tomorrow morning, he is a dead man. That is his weakness, his desperation. So we give him the house, Mrs. Higgins said softly. Or at least the promise of it. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number that had called me yesterday, the number of the son-in-law who had looked me in the eye and sent me to a cage. It rang 4 times. He was making me wait. Power play. Hello. Jared's voice was calm, almost bored. Jared, I rasped, letting my voice crack and break. It is Booker. There was a pause, then a shift in his tone. Booker, where are you? You are supposed to be in a cell. Did you break out? Because if you did, I am calling the cops right now, and they will shoot on sight. No, I lied. I am with a bail bondsman, Mrs. Higgins, the lady from the store. She put up her house to get me out. Jared laughed, a cruel barking sound. That old bat. She just lost her house then. Because you aren't going to trial Booker. You are going to the loony bin. I know, I whispered. I know I lost Jared. You win. I can't fight you. I am tired. I am just so tired, good, Jared said. Acceptance is the first step to recovery. So why are you calling me? I need money, I said. The lawyer says if I plead insanity, I can avoid prison, but I need money for the defense. I need money for the hospital, and I am ready to sign, I said. The house, the deed, whatever you want. Just promise me you won't put me in the state facility. Promise me a private room. I could hear the smile in his voice through the phone. It was the sound of a predator smelling blood. I can do that, Booker. We are family after all. I have the papers ready. Where do you want to meet? Not here, I said. Not at the bondsman's. I want to go home. One last time. I want to say goodbye to the house before I go away. Jared hesitated. The house, the scene of the crime, but his greed was louder than his caution. Fine. Meet me there in 2 hours. And Booker, yeah, don't try anything stupid. I am bringing my lawyer, and I am bringing the buyers. They want to inspect the property tonight. Cash deal. Fast close. Buyers, I asked, feigning confusion. At this hour. They are very motivated investors, Jared said. See you in 2 hours. The line went dead. I looked at Mrs. Higgins. Motivated investors, I repeated. That means the cartel. He is bringing the sharks right to my living room. Mrs. Higgins stood up and walked over to me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a key ring. Not the keys to her guest house. The keys to my house. The ones the police had taken from me. How, I asked. I have friends in the evidence locker, she said with a wink. You have a 2-hour head start, Booker. Do you need backup? I took the keys. The metal felt warm in my hand. No, I said. If I bring backup, he will see it. He will spook. I need him to think the house is empty. I need him to think he is walking into a victory lap. I turned to Lucille. She was awake, watching me with wide, fearful eyes. You stay here, I told her gently. Mrs. Higgins will keep you safe. Where are you going? She whispered. I am going to fix the house, Lucille, I said. I am going to fix everything. I buttoned my coat. I didn't look back. I climbed the stairs of the cellar and walked out into the cold Chicago night. I didn't take a taxi. I didn't take a bus. I took the Colonel's truck, which was parked in the alley. It was an old Ford, beat up and rusted just like mine used to be. I drove carefully, obeying every traffic light, staying under the speed limit. I was a ghost in the machine. When I turned onto my street, the neighborhood was quiet. The snow plows had finally come through, leaving walls of dirty slush on either side of the road. My house sat at the end of the block, dark and brooding. The police tape that had been across the door was gone, torn down by the wind or by a neighbor. I didn't park in the driveway. I parked 3 streets over behind the old community center. I walked the rest of the way, cutting through backyards, moving through the shadows like I had when I was a boy playing soldier. I reached my backyard. The footprints were still there, frozen monuments to the betrayal. I walked past the shed. I walked past the broken window where I had escaped. I reached the back door. I unlocked it and slipped inside. The house was freezing. The police had left the heat off, or maybe Jared had turned it off remotely to save money. It didn't matter. The cold was my friend. It kept my senses sharp. I didn't turn on the lights. I knew this house better than I knew the back of my own hand. I knew which floorboards creaked. I knew which doors drifted shut if you didn't latch them. I walked through the kitchen, running my hand along the counter where Lucille used to make coffee. I walked into the living room where I had been arrested. The spot on the rug where they handcuffed me was still matted down. I had 2 hours. I wasn't a contractor anymore. I was a soldier fortifying his position. I went to the basement first. I found my tool belt. I strapped it on. The weight of the hammer and the pliers on my hips felt like armor. I checked the breaker box. I made a few adjustments. Not enough to kill the power completely, just enough to make it temperamental. Then I went to the plumbing access panel behind the hallway closet. I found the main valve for the hydronic heating system. I loosened the pressure release valve just a fraction. I moved through the house with a grim purpose. I wasn't setting booby traps like in a cartoon. I was weaponizing the architecture. I was turning the sanctuary into a siege engine. I checked my watch. 1 hour gone. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I opened the safe in the closet. It was empty, of course. Jared had cleaned it out, but he hadn't checked the false bottom. I pried it up. My old service revolver was there, wrapped in an oilcloth. I checked the cylinder. Loaded. I didn't want to use it. Guns are loud. Guns are messy. But tonight I was dealing with men who dissolved people in acid for unpaid debts. I tucked the revolver into my waistband at the small of my back. I went back downstairs and sat in my armchair in the dark living room. I waited. 10 minutes passed. 20. Then I saw them. Headlights swept across the front window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. Not one car. 3. Jared's SUV pulled into the driveway first, then a sleek black sedan, then a large, windowless van. I stood up and moved to the shadows of the dining room. I had a clear line of sight to the front door, but I remained invisible. I heard car doors slamming, voices, laughter. Jared's voice rose above the wind. "Look at it, gentlemen. Prime real estate. Double lot. The structure is sound even if the decor is stuck in the 70s. We can bulldoze it and put up 6 luxury condos by spring." Another voice, deeper, heavily accented, answered. "We are not here for the condos, Vance. We are here for the collateral, the deed." "Do you have the old man? He is meeting us here," Jared said. "He is harmless. Just a scared old guy. He will sign anything I put in front of him." I heard footsteps on the porch, heavy, confident strides, the sound of men who owned the pavement they walked on. The key turned in the lock. The door swung open. Jared stepped in first. He reached for the light switch. Click. Nothing happened. "Damn it," Jared muttered. "The power must be out." He pulled out his phone, using the flashlight to cut through the gloom. Come in," he waved to the others. "Sorry about the chill. We will get the heat on in a second." 4 men followed him in. One was a man in a cheap suit carrying a briefcase, the lawyer, the notary. The other 3 were different. They wore leather jackets and expensive shoes that weren't made for snow. They moved with the coiled grace of predators. They didn't look at the house. They looked at the exits. These were the investors. The cartel. "Where is the old man?" the leader asked, scanning the empty living room with cold, dead eyes. "He said he would be here." Jared said, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice. Booker, are you here?" I stayed silent. I watched them fan out. I watched them violate my home with their muddy boots and their greed. "Maybe he got cold feet," the lawyer said, nervously clutching his briefcase. "He is here," Jared insisted. "His truck isn't outside, but look." Jared shone his light on the floor. On the coffee table in the center of the room sat a single bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses, and next to it a pen. "He was here," Jared said, walking over to the table. "The whiskey is fresh." He reached out to touch the glass. I stepped out from the shadows. The floorboard beneath my boot groaned a low, mournful sound that stopped them all in their tracks. "I am right here, Jared," I said, my voice low and steady, rolling through the room like thunder. Jared spun around his flashlight, blinding me for a second. "Booker!" He breathed, a smile of relief breaking across his face. "You scared me. Why are the lights out?" I ignored the question. I looked at the men behind him. "Are these the buyers?" I asked. "Yes," Jared said, stepping forward, regaining his arrogance. "This is Mr. Vargas and his associates. They are very interested in the property." I looked at Vargas. He stared back, his hand drifting towards the inside of his jacket. "Welcome to my home," I said. Jared clapped his hands. "Okay, great. Let's get this over with. I have the papers right here." He pulled a thick envelope from his coat pocket and tossed it onto the coffee table next to the whiskey. "Sign right there, Booker. The lawyer will notarize it. And then I will give you the cash for your defense." I walked slowly towards the table. The 3 cartel men tensed. I could smell their cologne mixed with the metallic scent of gun oil. I picked up the pen. I looked at the papers. It was a quitclaim deed transferring full ownership to Jared Vance for the sum of $10. I looked at Jared. He was practically vibrating with excitement. He was imagining his debt wiped clean. He was imagining his freedom. I didn't sign. Instead, I picked up the bottle of whiskey. I poured a shot into one of the glasses. "You know, Jared," I said, holding the glass up to the dim light, "my father taught me that before you make a deal, you should always toast to the truth." Jared frowned. "Just sign the damn paper, Booker. We don't have time for stories." I drank the shot. I slammed the glass down. "The truth," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "is that I lied." Jared froze. "What?" "I lied about the bail bondsman. I lied about the lawyer. And I lied about the house." What are you talking about? Jared hissed, stepping closer, his face twisting into a mask of rage. I am saying, I said, dropping the pen on the floor, that this house isn't for sale, and neither am I. Vargas stepped forward. Enough games. Sign the paper, old man, or I will cut your fingers off one by one until you can't hold a pen. He pulled a knife from his belt, a jagged, serrated blade that caught the beam of the flashlight. Jared looked at me, panic rising in his eyes. Booker, don't be an idiot. Sign it. These guys don't joke. I smiled, a cold, hard smile that I had learned from 40 winters in Chicago. I am not joking either, I said. And then I reached into my pocket, not for a weapon, but for a small remote control, the same one I used for the garage door opener but modified. I pressed the button. Behind them, the heavy steel security shutters I had installed over the front windows and the door, the ones I told Lucille were for storms, slammed down with a deafening crash. Clang, clang, clang. The room was plunged into total darkness as the streetlights were cut off. Panic erupted. What the hell? Open the door! I clicked my flashlight on. I wasn't pointing it at them. I was pointing it at myself, illuminating my face from below. You are not buying a house. Gentlemen, I said, my voice echoing in the sealed room. You are trespassing in a tomb, and I am the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. I clicked the light off and moved sideways into the darkness, just as the first gunshot flashed in the gloom. The game had begun, and they were playing on my board now. Before I stepped out of the shadows to confront the men who wanted to steal my life, I had spent the previous 90 minutes turning my home into a machine. You see, a house is not just wood and brick. It is a living, breathing system of wires, pipes, and pressure. Most people only see the paint on the walls, but a contractor sees the skeleton underneath. And I knew every bone in this body because I was the one who set them. When I first entered the house through the back door, the silence was heavy, but my mind was loud with calculations. I did not have a weapon in the traditional sense. I had a toolbox. I went to the utility room in the basement first, the heart of the house. The boiler was an old industrial model I had installed 30 years ago. It was reliable and powerful, capable of heating 3 floors in the dead of winter. I looked at the pressure gauge. It sat steady at 20 psi. I grabbed my wrench and turned the bypass valve on the hot water return. I watched the needle climb. 25, 30. I wasn't making a bomb, I was making a geyser. I routed the scalding water to the fire sprinkler system I had installed in the living room ceiling a decade ago. It was a dry system usually filled with compressed air, but tonight I primed it with water that was nearing 200 degrees. Next, I moved to the electrical panel. I didn't cut the power. That would be too simple. I rewired the main breaker for the living room circuit to a remote switch, the same remote I had in my pocket for the garage door. I wanted total control of the environment. Darkness had to be my choice, not an accident. Then came the eyes and ears. I went to the library where I kept my old electronics. I found 4 wireless security cameras I used to use for job sites to monitor material theft. I mounted one behind the vent in the hallway, one on top of the china cabinet in the dining room, and 2 hidden in the crown molding of the living room. I synced them all to a single secure server, a server I had set up with David's help earlier that evening. The feed wasn't going to a cloud storage. It was going to a direct IP address accessible only by 2 people, Judge Higgins and Police Chief Stevens. I placed my phone, the burner phone Mrs. Higgins gave me, under the sofa table. I taped it to the underside with duct tape, the microphone facing out towards the center of the room. I set it to broadcast audio continuously. Finally, I went to the front door. The lock was a standard deadbolt, but the frame was reinforced steel. I had installed heavy-duty storm shutters years ago, the kind that roll down automatically with the push of a button. They were meant for tornadoes, but tonight they were for containment. I disabled the manual override. Once those shutters came down, the only way out was through me or through a wall. By the time I saw the headlights sweep across the front window, I was sweating despite the cold. I wiped my hands on a rag and took my position in the darkness of the dining room. I watched them enter. Jared, Chantel, the lawyer, and the 3 men who looked like death in leather jackets. They didn't see me. They didn't see the camera lenses blinking in the shadows. They only saw a conquest. Jared walked in like he was Caesar returning to Rome. He didn't even wipe his boots. He tracked slush and mud onto the hardwood floors I had sanded by hand. He looked around the dim living room, lit only by the streetlights filtering in through the windows I hadn't shuttered yet. "It smells like old people in here," he laughed, throwing his coat onto my favorite armchair. "God, I can't wait to gut this place. We are going to knock down all these walls. Open concept, right, babe?" Chantel stood by the door shivering. She looked pale. She hugged her coat tight around herself. "I don't know, Jared," she whispered. "It feels wrong being here. What if he comes back? What if the police come back?" "Relax," Jared scoffed, walking over to my liquor cabinet. He picked up a bottle of Macallan 18, my special occasion scotch. He didn't ask. He just cracked the seal and poured himself a generous glass. He poured 3 more for the cartel men. To new beginnings he toasted, raising the glass, and to the end of dead weight. Vargas, the leader of the thugs, took the glass but didn't drink. He walked around the room touching things with a sneer. "The furniture is trash," he said, "but the location is good. The boss will be happy with the land value. Just make sure the title is clean, Vance. We don't want legal trouble." "It is clean as a whistle," Jared said, taking a long swig of my whiskey. "The old man is basically a vegetable at this point. I have him so confused he thinks he is signing a permission slip for a field trip." Chantel stepped forward, her voice trembling. You said we were just going to put him in a home. You said he would be safe." Jared rolled his eyes. He set the glass down on the coffee table hard enough to leave a ring. "Chantel, grow up. Safe is a relative term. He is going to a state facility. It is crowded, it is understaffed, and yeah, it smells like piss. But it is what we can afford. Once we sell this place and pay off our friends here, there won't be much left for luxury nursing homes." "But Mom," Chantel pressed, "you promised Mom would be okay. You said Sunny Pines was just temporary." "It is temporary," Jared said, and his voice dropped to a sinister whisper. A whisper that the microphone under the table picked up perfectly. "Because she isn't going to last long, Chantel. Did you see her? She is weak. She is broken. A few weeks of high-dose sedatives, a little neglect, and nature will take its course. Pneumonia is a blessing in places like that." I gripped the door frame in the dark until my knuckles turned white. He wasn't just planning to steal. He was planning to let them die. He was confessing to premeditated murder by negligence. One of the cartel men laughed. "You are a cold bastard, Vance. I like that. It is just business." Jared shrugged, pouring another drink. They had their time. They lived long lives. Now it is our turn. The world belongs to the young and the hungry. Booker and Lucille are just expired inventory. He walked over to the fireplace and kicked at the grate. "And the best part is the old fool trusts me. He actually thinks I am trying to help him avoid jail. He has no idea that I planted that bat. He has no idea I hired the actor to play the notary. He is walking right into the slaughterhouse and he is wagging his tail." I checked my watch. The feed was live. I knew Mrs. Higgins was watching. I knew the chief was listening. Every word was a nail in his coffin. But I needed one more thing. I needed the threat. I needed him to confirm the violence. What if he refuses to sign? The lawyer asked, speaking up for the first time. He looked nervous, clutching his briefcase to his chest. Jared laughed and pointed at Vargas. "That is why I brought the insurance. If Booker hesitates, if he tries to play hero, Vargas here will show him exactly how fragile elderly bones are. A broken finger makes holding a pen difficult but not impossible. And if that doesn't work, well, accidents happen on icy stairs all the time." Vargas pulled a knife from his belt, picking his nails with the tip. "Don't worry about the old man. If he doesn't sign, he disappears. Nobody looks for a senile fugitive who skips bail. That is what I needed. Conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, extortion. It was all there, recorded in high-definition audio and video. I pulled the remote from my pocket. My thumb hovered over the button that would drop the shutters and trap them inside with me. Jared took another sip of whiskey. He looked around the room, a king in his castle. "This is going to be so easy," he said. I can't believe how stupid he is. I stepped out of the dining room shadows, my boots heavy on the floor. The sound was deliberate. An announcement. "I wouldn't count on that, Jared," I said, my voice booming in the quiet house. He spun around, spilling the scotch. The smile dropped from his face like a mask shattering. Booker. I stood there, outlined by the faint light from the hall. Stupid is assuming the man who built the roof over your head doesn't know how to bring it down on top of you. I pressed the button on the remote. The steel shutters slammed down over the windows and doors with a sound like a prison cell closing. Clang, clang, clang. The room went pitch black, and the live stream continued broadcasting the screams of men who just realized they weren't the hunters anymore. They were the prey. The steel shutters had turned my living room into a sealed box, and the sudden darkness had turned the predators into panicked animals. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of heavy breathing and the clicking of gun safeties being disengaged. Then beam by beam, flashlights cut through the gloom, crisscrossing in the dusty air like searchlights in a prison yard. They swept over the furniture, the empty fireplace, and finally they landed on Jared. He was standing in the middle of the room, shaking not from the cold but from the realization that he had led wolves into a trap, and the trap door had just snapped shut. Vargas, the leader of the cartel men, did not panic. He was a professional. He shone his light directly into Jared's face, blinding him. "You said the old man was harmless, Vance. You said this was a quick signature and a handshake. Does this look like a handshake to you?" Jared shielded his eyes, his other hand groping for the wall. "It is just a power outage," he stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. "The storm must have knocked out the grid. The shutters are automatic safety features. I can override them. I just need to find the panel." "You better find it fast," Vargas growled, "or I will override your kneecaps." But Jared wasn't looking for the shutter controls. I watched from my hiding spot in the dining room shadows as his eyes darted around the room with manic desperation. He wasn't thinking about escaping. He was thinking about the money. He knew he couldn't leave this house without the deed or the cash. If he walked out that door empty-handed, Vargas would put a bullet in the back of his head before they reached the driveway. He spun around, his flashlight beam dancing wildly on the walls. "The safe," he muttered. "The old man has a safe. He keeps cash. Emergency cash. He told me once." He ran towards the north wall, the wall behind the large oil painting of the Chicago skyline I had bought for Lucille on our 20th anniversary. He didn't take the painting down gently. He ripped it from the hooks, throwing it onto the floor. The canvas tore, the frame cracked. My heart twitched, but I stayed silent. Let him destroy the decorations. He was about to destroy himself. Behind the painting was a patch of drywall that looked slightly different from the rest. I had patched it years ago when I moved the wall studs. Jared saw it and thought he had found treasure. "It is here," he screamed, pounding on the wall with his fist. "It is behind here. I know it." He hid it. He looked around for a tool. He saw the heavy iron fire poker sitting in the stand next to the hearth. He grabbed it, swinging it like a madman. "Jared, stop!" Chantel shrieked from the corner where she was huddled. "You are destroying the house." "Shut up, Chantel!" Jared roared, bringing the iron poker down on the wall with a sickening crunch. Plaster exploded. Dust billowed out into the flashlight beams. "I need that money. We need that money." He struck the wall again and again. Each blow was a confession of his greed. He hacked at the lath and plaster, tearing a hole in the very structure of the home I had built. He was panting, sweating, spitting debris from his mouth. He looked like a wild animal digging for a bone. The cartel men watched him in silence, their guns lowered but ready. They were curious. Maybe there was money. If there was, they would take it and leave Jared to rot. Finally, with a grunt of exertion, Jared ripped away a large chunk of drywall, revealing the gray metal face of a wall safe. "I told you," he gasped, dropping the poker. "I told you he had a stash." He fell to his knees in front of the safe. His fingers were bleeding from the jagged plaster, but he didn't care. He spun the dial. Left to 10, right to 25, left to 4. I watched with a cold smile. He remembered the combination. It was Chantel's birthday. The fact that he knew it meant he had been planning to rob me long before tonight. He had probably memorized it years ago, waiting for the right moment. The lock clicked. The handle turned. Jared pulled the heavy door open. A look of pure, euphoric triumph washed over his face, illuminated by the harsh light of his flashlight. He reached inside, but his hand didn't find stacks of $100 bills. It didn't find gold coins. It didn't find the deed to the house. He froze. He patted the empty metal interior frantically. He pulled his hand out and shone the light inside. It was empty, except for a single piece of yellow legal paper taped to the back wall. Jared ripped the paper down. He held it up to the light, his hands shaking so violently the paper rattled. "What does it say?" Vargas asked, stepping closer, his voice low and dangerous. Jared stared at the paper, his mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. Vargas snatched the paper from his hand. He read it aloud, his thick accent making the words sound like a death sentence. "The money is not here, you idiot. Check your pockets. You already spent it all." Silence filled the room. A heavy, suffocating silence that was broken only by the sound of the wind howling outside the shuttered windows. "It is a trick," Jared whispered. He moved it. The old bastard moved it. He knew. How did he know? Vargas crumpled the note and dropped it on the floor. He looked at his two associates. They nodded. They holstered their guns and pulled out knives. "You wasted our time," Vance Vargas said, "and you insulted my intelligence. I told you the deadline was yesterday. I gave you a 24-hour extension because you promised me a property, a clean asset." "It is clean," Jared pleaded, backing away until he hit the ruined wall. "I can still sell it. We just need to find him. He is in the house. He has to be." "We are done looking," Vargas said. "You owe us $500,000 plus interest. Since you don't have the cash and you don't have the house, we will take the payment in flesh, just to send a message to other gamblers who think they can play games with the cartel." One of the thugs grabbed Jared by the lapels of his expensive coat and slammed him onto the coffee table. Glasses shattered. The whiskey bottle rolled onto the floor, spilling the amber liquid I had poured for a toast. "No, no, please," Jared screamed, kicking his legs. "Chantel, help me. Call the police. Call someone." Chantel screamed. It was a raw, primal sound. She scrambled backwards, knocking over a lamp. She pressed herself against the shuttered front door, clawing at the metal. "Husband," she wailed, using the word like a plea. "Husband, you told me he was dead. You told me Dad died of a heart attack. You said we were just coming to sign the papers for the estate. Why is there a safe? Why are there men with knives?" Vargas paused, looking at Chantel. "He told you the old man was dead." "Yes." Chantel sobbed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "He swore on our marriage. He said Dad died yesterday. He said we had to hide the body to avoid an autopsy because Dad had drugs in his system. He said he was protecting the family reputation." I listened from the dark and felt a pang of pity mixed with disgust. My daughter, so gullible, so weak. But her confession was the final nail. She had just admitted on tape that she believed I was dead and had agreed to cover it up. She was an accessory to a crime that hadn't even happened yet. So Vargas said, turning back to Jared, who was pinned to the table, "You are a liar to your wife, a liar to your father-in-law, and a liar to me. I don't like liars, Vance. They are bad for business." He grabbed Jared's left hand. He splayed the fingers out on the wood surface amidst the broken glass and spilled alcohol. "We start with the pinky," Vargas said, raising the knife. "A small payment," Jared shrieked, a high-pitched sound that wasn't human. No, wait. The deed. I have the deed in my pocket. I can forge his signature. I can forge it right now. It will pass, I promise." "You had your chance," Vargas said. He brought the knife down, not to cut yet, but to dig the tip into the wood between Jared's fingers. A warning. Jared was sobbing now, snot and tears running down his face. He looked pathetic. The arrogant businessman was gone. The cruel son-in-law was gone. There was only a coward begging for mercy he didn't deserve. I had seen enough. The recording had everything. The threat, the confession, the motive. Mrs. Higgins had enough evidence to put them all away for life. But I wasn't done. I wanted them to know who beat them. I wanted them to see the face of the man they called a vegetable. I reached into my pocket and found the remote, not the one for the shutters, the one for the lights. I stepped out of the dining room archway. I walked to the center of the rug just a few feet away from the table where Jared was pinned. I cleared my throat. "Let him go," I said. Vargas looked up. The thug spun around, weapons raised. Jared twisted his head, his eyes wide with shock. "Dad," Chantel whispered, sliding down the door to the floor. "You are a ghost." "I am not a ghost, Chantel," I said, my voice steady. "And I am not a vegetable, Jared." I pressed the button on the remote. The lights in the living room didn't just turn on. They flared. The construction floodlights I had rigged in the corners blazed to life, bathing the room in a blinding white glare. It was like an interrogation room. It washed out the shadows and exposed every speck of dust, every drop of sweat, every lie. The cartel men squinted, raising their hands to shield their eyes. I stood there holding the remote in one hand and my other hand resting casually near the revolver at my back. I looked at Jared. "You broke my wall, son," I said, pointing to the hole he had dug. "That is going to come out of your inheritance." "Oh, wait. You don't have one anymore." Booker Jared gasped. "Help me. These men. They are crazy. Call the cops." Please. I looked at Vargas. He hadn't backed down. He was blinking against the light, but his knife was still in his hand. Who are you? Old man Vargas asked. I am the landlord, I said, and your lease has just expired. Vargas laughed. You think a few lights scare me. We are 3. You are 1. And you look tired. I am tired, I admitted. I am tired of my family trying to kill me. I am tired of thugs tracking mud into my house. And I am very tired of this conversation. I held up the remote again, so I invited some friends over to finish it for me. From outside the shuttered house came a sound that shook the floorboards. Not wind, not thunder, sirens, dozens of them, approaching from all sides. The wail of the police was deafening, penetrating the steel shutters, and then a voice on a megaphone. This is the Chicago Police Department. The house is surrounded. Drop your weapons and come out with your hands up. Vargas looked at me, then at the shuttered door, then at Jared. You set us up, he snarled. I didn't set you up, I said calmly, taking a step back as they panicked. I just turned on the lights. The roaches did the rest. Jared took advantage of the distraction. He kicked the thug holding him and scrambled off the table, crawling towards me. Booker, tell them I was a hostage. Tell them I didn't know. Please, I am family. I looked down at him, at the man who had locked my wife in a cage. Family, I said, cold as the winter outside. I lifted my foot and kicked him hard in the chest, pushing him back towards the men with the knives. My family is safe. You are just an intruder. Then I dropped the remote and raised my hands as the police battering ram hit the front door. Boom! The steel shutter buckled. It was time for the final act. The sound of the steel shutters slamming into the floorboards was final. It was the sound of a prison door closing for eternity. The heavy industrial metal sheets I had installed 3 years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood now formed a solid, impenetrable wall between the inside of my house and the freedom outside. The living room was no longer a place of comfort. It was a concrete box sealed tight against the world. For a moment, there was chaos. The 3 men from the cartel scrambled backward, their boots slipping on the polished wood floor. Vargas raised his gun and fired blindly into the darkness before the floodlights had fully adjusted his vision. The muzzle flash was blinding, a sudden explosion of fire that illuminated the panic on their faces. The bullet buried itself harmlessly in the ceiling plaster, sending a shower of white dust down onto the expensive rug. Hold your fire, you idiot! Jared screamed, scrambling away from the center of the room on his hands and knees. You will ricochet a bullet into one of us. I stepped back into the hallway. Between the living room and the foyer where I stood, there was a set of French doors. To the naked eye, they looked like elegant decorative glass panes with oak frames. But like everything else in this house, they were a lie, or rather, they were a fortification. I had replaced the standard glass with polycarbonate laminate last year, bullet-resistant, shatterproof. I pulled the doors shut and turned the heavy brass lock. Click. I was now standing in the safety of the foyer, looking into the living room like a visitor at a zoo looking into the lion enclosure. Vargas saw me. He raised his weapon again, leveling it at my chest through the glass. Open it, he roared. Open this door or I will turn this house into Swiss cheese. Go ahead, I said, my voice calm but amplified by the acoustics of the hallway. Shoot. But I wouldn't waste the ammunition. That glass is rated to stop a .44 Magnum. Your little 9mm will just scratch the polish. Vargas hesitated. He lowered the gun slightly, his eyes narrowing. He walked up to the glass and kicked it. The door didn't budge. It didn't even vibrate. He realized then that he wasn't dealing with a normal homeowner. Who are you? He whispered, his breath fogging the glass. I walked closer until my face was inches from his, separated only by the transparent shield. I told you, I said. I am the landlord, and you are damaging my property. I looked past him to where Jared was cowering behind the sofa. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him for the last 5 years had evaporated, leaving only a shivering boy in a man's coat. Jared, stand up, I commanded. Jared looked up. He saw me safe behind the glass. He saw the cartel men trapped with him. He realized that the dynamic had shifted. I was the warden. He was the inmate. Booker, please. He wept, standing up slowly, his hands raised in surrender. I didn't mean it. They forced me. These men, they threatened Chantel. I had to bring them here. I was trying to protect the family. I shook my head slowly. The disappointment was heavy in my chest, heavier than the anger. Stop lying, son, I said. Even now at the end, you are still trying to sell a story. Nobody forced you to gamble away your life savings. Nobody forced you to borrow money from murderers. And nobody forced you to drag my wife out of her home and lock her in a cage. I didn't lock her up, Jared pleaded, moving towards the glass, his eyes darting back to Vargas, who was watching him with murderous intent. It was a medical facility. She needed care. I laughed. A dry, bitter sound. Care. Is that what you call it? You call forging a signature care? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I pressed it against the glass. It was a photocopy of the withdrawal slip from my pension fund. $200,000, Jared. 30 years of sweat and frozen fingers. That was the money I saved to take Lucille to Paris. That was the money for our medical bills. And you took it. You practiced my signature until you got it right, and you drained the account 3 days ago. Chantel gasped. She was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, rocking back and forth. 200,000, she whispered. Jared, you said the business was doing well. You said we were rich. He lied to you too, baby, I said, looking at my daughter. He has been broke for 6 months. He stole from me to pay the interest on his debts. And when that ran out, he decided that a dead father-in-law was worth more than a living one. That is not true, Jared screamed, slamming his fist against the glass. I loved you, Booker. I was going to pay it back. I just needed the house money to bridge the gap. You were never going to pay it back, I said. You were going to kill us. Plan B. Remember, the explosion, the accident. Jared's face went white. He realized I had read the notebook. He realized I knew everything. But words were cheap. Jared was a master of words. I needed to show them the reality. I needed to strip away the last layer of his defense. I turned to the wall-mounted television above the fireplace in the living room. It was a smart TV connected to the home network. I pulled the remote from my pocket. You want to talk about care, Jared? Let's look at how you cared for your mother-in-law. I pointed the remote through the glass and pressed play. The 60-inch screen flickered to life. The footage was grainy black and white, but the horror was high definition. It was the security footage David and Mrs. Higgins had pulled from the Sunny Pines server just an hour ago. The timestamp showed Sunday night, 11:45 p.m. The camera angle looked down on a small, bleak room. Lucille lay strapped to the metal cot. She was thrashing against the restraints, her mouth moving in a silent scream. Then the door opened. Jared walked in. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was wearing his expensive coat. He stood over her. He didn't hold her hand. He didn't comfort her. He pulled a syringe from his pocket. Chantel let out a strangled cry. She scrambled to her feet, staring at the screen. In the video, Jared leaned down. He said something to Lucille. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. Jared slapped her. The sound of the slap didn't come through the video, but the violence of the motion made everyone in the living room flinch. Even Vargas looked away. Then Jared jammed the needle into her arm. He pushed the plunger down. Lucille's body went rigid, then slumped. Jared stood up. He checked his watch. He smoothed his hair in the reflection of the window. And then he walked out, leaving her unconscious and alone in the dark. I pressed pause. The image of Jared fixing his hair while my wife lay drugged on a cot froze on the screen. I lowered the remote. Chantel turned to her husband. Her face was no longer the face of a scared girl. It was the face of a woman who had just watched her soul shatter. You hit her, she whispered. You drugged her. Jared backed away, hands held up. Babe, it is not what it looks like. It was a sedative. She was hysterical. The doctor said, There was no doctor. Chantel screamed. She launched herself at him. She clawed at his face, her nails digging into the skin of the man she had worshipped. You monster. You touched my mother. You told me she was at a spa. Jared shoved her away. She fell hard against the coffee table. Get off me, you crazy bitch, he snarled. I did it for us. I did it so we wouldn't end up on the street. Vargas stepped forward. He grabbed Jared by the back of the neck and threw him against the wall. You are a liability, Vance Vargas said calmly. You bring too much heat, and you have no money. He raised his gun, pointing it right at Jared's forehead. Jared slid down the wall, weeping. Booker, help me. Open the door. He is going to kill me. I stood there behind the glass. I looked at the man who had tried to erase my existence. I looked at the gun. I could open the door. I could try to intervene, but I didn't. I am not the police, Jared, I said. I am just the landlord. and I don't interfere in tenant disputes." Jared's eyes went wide. He realized I was going to let it happen. He realized that the old man he had underestimated was capable of a coldness he couldn't comprehend. But before Vargas could pull the trigger, a new sound filled the air. It started as a low whine like a distant wind, and then swelled into a cacophony that vibrated the very fillings in my teeth. Sirens. Not one, not two, but a swarm. Blue and red lights began to flash through the cracks in the steel shutters, casting a strobe effect across the living room terror. The walls pulsed with the colors of the law. A voice boomed from a megaphone outside, distorted but deafening. "This is the Chicago Police Department. The house is surrounded. Come out with your hands up. We have snipers on the roof. I repeat, we have snipers on the roof." Vargas cursed. He lowered the gun. He ran to the shuttered window looking for a gap. "There is no way out," I said, my voice cutting through their panic. "Those shutters are rated for Category 5 hurricanes, and the police have the override codes." Vargas turned to me, his eyes full of hate. "You rat. You set us up." I checked my watch. "Right on time," I said. The phone in the living room, the one taped under the table, rang. It was a jarring sound in the tense room. Jared looked at it. "Answer it," I said. "It might be your lawyer." Jared crawled to the table. He fumbled for the phone. He put it on speaker. "Hello," he whimpered. "Jared Vance." Mrs. Higgins' voice filled the room, sharp and clear as a bell. "This is Judge Higgins. I have just issued a warrant for your arrest for attempted murder, kidnapping, and grand larceny." "And Mr. Vargas?" Vargas froze, looking at the phone. "The DEA is very interested in the 5 kilos of cocaine they just found in the trunk of your car outside. My son David is very good at anonymous tips." The front door shook. A battering ram hit the steel shutter. Boom! The metal groaned. "It is over," I said, turning my back on the glass. I walked down the hallway towards the kitchen, leaving them trapped in the box I had built. Chantel was sobbing on the floor. Jared was staring at the wall, and Vargas was dropping his gun. The house was no longer mine. It was a crime scene. But for the first time in days, it felt clean. The sound of the battering ram hitting the steel shutter was not a thud. It was a bell tolling for the end of Jared's world. The metal groaned and buckled under the hydraulic force of the police tactical team outside. I stood in the hallway behind the safety of my bulletproof glass doors, watching the final moments of the empire my son-in-law thought he had built. It crumbled not with a bang, but with the pathetic whimpering of a man who had never faced a consequence in his life. The shutter ripped open. Sparks showered the living room as the metal tore away from the frame. The cold night air rushed in, swirling the dust and debris from the wall Jared had destroyed. Beams of tactical lights cut through the gloom, blinding the 3 cartel men and the weeping coward on the floor. "Police. Get on the ground. Now." The shout was a wall of sound. Uniformed officers poured into the room like a flood. They moved with a precision that was terrifying to watch. Vargas and his men knew the drill. They dropped to their knees, hands behind their heads. They were professionals in their own twisted way. They knew when the game was lost. They didn't resist. They didn't scream. They just accepted that tonight the house had won. But Jared did not accept it. Jared scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He looked at the cops, then he looked at me, standing safely behind the glass, and his brain snapped. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Help me. Thank God you are here. He is crazy. That old man is crazy. He kidnapped us." He ran toward the first officer, his hands waving frantically. "Officer, arrest him. He has a gun. He trapped us in here. He is holding my wife hostage. I tried to reason with him, but he is senile. He thinks he is the landlord of the world." The officer didn't lower his weapon. He shoved Jared back hard. "Get on the ground, sir." "No, you don't understand." Jared shrieked, his voice cracking. "I am the victim here. I am a businessman. These men," he pointed at Vargas, "these men are his hired thugs. He brought them here to rob me. Look at the safe. He made me open the safe." I watched him spin his web of lies. It was impressive in a sickening way. Even with the noose around his neck, he was trying to sell one last con. He was willing to frame me, frame the cartel, frame anyone to save his own skin. Tell them Chantel Jared yelled at my daughter, who was still huddled on the floor. Tell them your father lost his mind. Tell them he threatened us." Chantel looked up. Her mascara was running down her face in black rivers. She looked at Jared, then she looked at me. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed by the shattering of her reality. "Get down!" the officer shouted again, forcing Jared to his knees. "I am innocent," Jared sobbed, his face pressed into my expensive rug. "This is a mistake. You are going to hear from my lawyer. You are all going to lose your badges." From the gaping hole where the front door used to be, a new figure stepped into the room. She didn't wear tactical gear. She didn't carry a gun. She wore a wool coat and carried a leather handbag, but she commanded more authority than anyone else in the room. Mrs. Higgins stepped over the debris. Behind her walked a tall man with gray hair and 4 stars on his collar. "Chief Stevens, save it, Jared." Mrs. Higgins said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "The only lawyer you are going to see is a public defender. And frankly, I pity the poor soul who gets assigned your file." Jared lifted his head. "Who are you?" "I am the woman who watched you buy cat food with a stolen credit card 10 years ago," Mrs. Higgins said, looking down at him with pure disdain. "And I am the judge who signed the warrant for your arrest 5 minutes ago." She turned to the chief. "Chief Stevens, do you have the package?" "I do," Judge the chief said. He held up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small digital recorder, not the one I had hidden under the table, a different one. Jared stared at the bag. He looked confused. "We have the live stream from the living room, Jared," Mrs. Higgins said. "We heard your confession about the fraud. We heard your confession about the nursing home. But my son David is very thorough. When he hacked your phone to get the location of the nursing home, he also retrieved your deleted voice memos." She nodded to the chief. He pressed play on the recorder. Jared's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the room. "Listen. I don't care how you do it, just make it look like an accident. The old man has a bad heart. Maybe he falls down the stairs. Maybe he gets mugged in the alley. I don't care. Just make sure he is gone before the sale closes. I will pay you $5,000 now and $10,000 when the obituary is printed." The recording stopped. Silence descended on the room. Even the police officers looked at Jared with disgust. It wasn't just greed. It was a hit. He had put a price tag on my life. $15,000. That was what 40 years of fatherhood was worth to him. Vargas laughed from where he was kneeling. $15 grand, you cheap bastard. You owe me 500 and you offer a hitman 15. You are an insult to criminals everywhere." Jared's face crumpled. He realized there was no spin for this. There was no lie big enough to cover a contract killing. That was out of context," he whispered. Mrs. Higgins leaned down. Her face was inches from his. "You are going to prison, Jared. And not the white-collar resort you are imagining. You are going to Stateville, and I am going to make sure the DA seeks the maximum sentence for every single count. Attempted murder, elderly abuse, grand larceny, conspiracy, kidnapping." She stood up and brushed invisible dust from her coat. "Get him out of my sight." 2 officers hauled Jared to his feet. He didn't fight. His legs gave out and they had to drag him. As they pulled him past the glass doors, he looked at me. His eyes were empty holes. "Booker," he mouthed, "please." I just stared at him. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I just watched the garbage being taken out. They took Vargas and his men next. Vargas stopped as he passed the glass. He nodded to me. "Nice move, landlord," he said. "I respect the game." I watched them load him into the van. I felt nothing, no triumph, no joy, just a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The room cleared out. The officers began photographing the scene, the hole in the wall, the safe, the broken glass. Mrs. Higgins tapped on the glass door. "You can come out now, Booker," she said softly. "It is over." I unlocked the French doors. I stepped out into the living room. It smelled of drywall dust and fear. I looked at the corner. Chantel was still sitting there. An officer was standing near her, unsure of what to do. She wasn't in handcuffs yet. Mrs. Higgins looked at me, then at the officer. "Give them a minute," she said. The officer nodded and stepped back, giving us space. I walked over to my daughter. She looked small. She looked like the little girl who used to scrape her knees playing in the driveway. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her hands were shaking. "Daddy," she whispered. I didn't answer. I just stood there looking down at her. I didn't know she sobbed, reaching out to grab the hem of my trousers. "I swear to God, Daddy, I didn't know about the hitman. I didn't know he wanted to kill you. I thought I thought we were just getting power of attorney. I thought we were just securing the assets. Securing the assets, I repeated, my voice flat. Is that what you call locking your mother in a room with barred windows? Is that what you call watching her get injected with drugs until she stops screaming? Chantel flinched as if I had slapped her. He told me it was for her own good, she cried. He said she was sick. He said you were overwhelmed. I believed him, Daddy. He is my husband. I loved him. And I am your father, I said. I changed your diapers. I paid for your college. I walked you down the aisle and handed you to that man. I trusted you to have my back. I crouched down so I was eye level with her. I needed her to hear this. I needed her to understand the magnitude of what she had broken. You stood in this room, Chantel. You stood right there and you watched him destroy the walls I built. You heard him threaten to cut off my fingers. And you didn't call the police. You didn't scream for help. You begged him to stop, not because it was wrong, but because you were scared of getting caught. No, Daddy, please. You chose him, I said. You chose the money. You chose the lie. I am sorry, she wailed, trying to grab my hand. I am so sorry. Please forgive me. I will make it right. I will testify against him. I will do anything. Just don't look at me like that. I pulled my hand away. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every instinct in my body wanted to comfort my child. But looking at her, I didn't see my child. I saw the woman who had helped dig my grave. You can't make it right, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. You watched him bury your mother alive. You watched him plan my murder, and you only started crying when the police showed up. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt every day of my 70 years. Daddy, please, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. He took everything. We lost the house. We lost the car. I looked around the ruined living room. We all lost everything tonight, Chantel. I turned to the officer who was waiting by the door. Officer, I said, pointing to my daughter. Yes, Mr. Washington. She is an accessory, I said. She knew about the kidnapping. She knew about the fraud. And she obstructed justice by lying to you earlier tonight. Chantel screamed. Daddy, no, do your job, son, I said, turning my back on her. The officer moved in. I heard the click of the handcuffs. I heard her screaming my name, begging me to look at her, begging me to save her. Daddy, please, I am your little girl. I walked to the broken window. I looked out at the snow. It was dirty now, trampled by dozens of boots. The pristine white blanket was gone, churned into gray slush. I didn't turn around. I listened to the sound of my daughter being led away. I listened to the front door close. Mrs. Higgins walked up beside me. She didn't say anything. She just placed a hand on my arm. It was the right thing to do, she said quietly. I know, I whispered. But as I watched the police car drive away with Chantel in the back, I realized that Jared was right about one thing. The old man had died tonight. The Booker Washington who believed in family, who believed in blood, who believed that love was enough. He died in this room. And the man standing in the window was someone else entirely. A survivor. But a survivor standing in the ashes of his own heart. Let's go get Lucille, I said, turning away from the window. She is waiting. Mrs. Higgins nodded. We walked out of the house, leaving the lights on, leaving the ruin behind. I didn't lock the door. There was nothing left inside worth stealing. The silence that followed the police sirens was heavier than the storm. The house was a wreck. My living room looked like a war zone with shattered glass covering the floor and a gaping hole in the wall where Jared had dug for fool's gold. The cold wind blew through the broken front shutters, swirling the drywall dust into little tornadoes that danced in the beams of the construction lights I had left on. I stood in the middle of the debris, feeling like the captain of a ship that had survived a hurricane but lost its masts. Mrs. Higgins walked in from the kitchen, leading Lucille by the arm. My wife looked nothing like the woman who had walked out that door 24 hours ago. She was wearing a borrowed coat that was too big for her. Her hair was a bird's nest. Her face was pale and drawn, etched with the trauma of the nursing home and the drugs. She looked frail. She looked old. For the first time in 40 years, she looked her age. She stopped when she saw me. She looked at the handcuffs on the floor that had held our daughter. She looked at the blood on the coffee table where Jared had been pinned. Then she looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears. Booker, she whispered. Her voice was cracked and dry. I didn't move. I didn't rush to hold her. I stayed where I was standing on the other side of the room, separated from her not just by distance, but by a chasm of betrayal that no bridge could cross. Mrs. Higgins patted Lucille's hand gently. "I will wait in the car, Booker. Take as long as you need." The judge walked out, stepping carefully over the broken glass. The front door was gone, ripped off its hinges, so she just walked out into the night, leaving us alone in the ruins of our marriage. Lucille took a step towards me. She reached out a trembling hand. "Booker, I am so sorry," she sobbed. "It was a nightmare. They tied me down. They drugged me. I thought I was going to die in that room. Thank God you came for me. Thank God you are smart." I watched her. I felt a phantom pain in my chest. I still loved her. That was the terrible truth. You don't stop loving someone after 40 years just because they break your heart. I wanted to wrap her in my arms. I wanted to tell her it was okay. I wanted to be the protector I had always been. But then I looked at the spot in the hallway where she had stood yesterday. I remembered her face as she looked at me with disdain. I remembered her calling me boring. I remembered her walking out into the snow without a backward glance. "Jared is a monster," she cried, wiping her eyes. "He tricked me, Booker. He told me the papers were for taxes. He told me the trip was a vacation. I didn't know he was going to lock me up. You have to believe me. I believe you, Lucille," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, dead, like a hammer hitting cold iron. "I believe you didn't know about the nursing home. I believe you didn't know about the hitman." She let out a breath of relief. She took another step closer. "Oh, Booker, thank you. I knew you would understand. We can fix this. We can testify against him together. We can rebuild." I held up a hand. She stopped. "I believe you were a victim of his cruelty," I continued. "But Lucille, you were not a victim of his plan to leave me. You were a willing participant in that." She froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "You didn't pack those bags because Jared forced you," I said, feeling the anger rise up slow and hot. "You packed them because you wanted to go. You stood right there in that doorway and you looked at me like I was a piece of old furniture you were throwing out. You called me boring. You said you were suffocating. That was just talk," she stammered. "I was stressed. I didn't mean it. You meant every word I said. You signed those papers, Lucille, not the ones for the nursing home, the ones for the house. You signed over your half of our life to a man you knew was a liar because he promised you a shiny new future in Florida. You were willing to sell our history for a plane ticket." She looked down at the floor. The shame radiated off her like heat. "I just wanted to feel alive, Booker," she whispered. "You are always so practical, always so safe. I wanted magic." "Jared promised me magic." "Magic," I scoffed. I looked around the destroyed room. "This is his magic, Lucille. Ruin, bankruptcy, prison. That is the magic you chased." I walked over to the desk in the corner. Remarkably, it was untouched. The looters hadn't cared about my old roll-top desk. They were looking for cash, not memories. I opened the bottom drawer. It stuck a little like it always did. I pulled it open. Underneath a stack of old blueprints, there was a manila envelope. The paper was yellowed with age. I took it out. I walked back to Lucille and held it out to her. "What is this?" she asked, her hands shaking as she took it. "Open it," I said. She opened the clasp. She pulled out the document. She read the title and gasped. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." You wanted to divorce me?" she asked, looking up at me with wide, shocked eyes. "I wrote that 10 years ago," I said. "Do you remember? The time you maxed out our credit cards to buy that timeshare in Cabo. The one that turned out to be a scam. We almost lost the house then, too." Lucille nodded, tears spilling onto the paper. "I went to a lawyer," I said. "I sat in his office and I told him everything. I told him how you spent money we didn't have, how you looked down on my work, how you made me feel small in my own home. He drew up those papers. He told me to sign them and run. But you didn't," she whispered. "No, I didn't. I put them in that drawer. Because I looked at Chantel, who was just starting her own life, and I looked at you, and I remembered the girl I met at the dance hall 40 years ago. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I worked harder, if I built a stronger foundation, I could hold us together. I looked at the wreckage of the house. I was wrong," I said. "You can't fix a house when the termite is in the heart of the wood. Booker, please, she begged, dropping the papers and grabbing my coat. Don't do this. I have nowhere to go. Chantel is in jail. Jared is in jail. I have no money. I have no friends. You are all I have. That is the problem, Lucille, I said, gently removing her hands from my coat. I am all you have now because your better option turned out to be a trap. If Jared hadn't locked you up, if he had actually taken you to a condo in Miami and given you cocktails by the pool, would you be here right now? Would you be crying for me? Or would you be laughing at the boring old man freezing to death in Chicago? She didn't answer. She couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't old. It was crisp and new. I had printed it at Mrs. Higgins' house before I came here. I handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked. "You wanted to go to Florida," I said. "You told me you were suffocating here. You told me you needed the sun." She looked at the paper. It was an airline ticket. One way, Chicago to Miami. Departs tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. "I bought this for you," I said. "It is non-refundable." "Booker, no," she wailed. "I don't want to go. Not alone. Not like this." "You made your choice, Lucille," I said, my voice hardening. "You made it yesterday when you walked out that door. You made it last week when you signed the deed. And you made it 10 years ago when you stopped being my partner and started being my burden." I walked to the closet. Her suitcases were gone, taken by Jared, or lost in the shuffle. But her purse was there, sitting on the entryway table where she had left it in her rush yesterday. I picked it up. I checked inside. Her wallet was there, her ID. I stuffed the ticket into her purse. I handed the bag to her. "There is a cab waiting at the end of the block," I lied. Or maybe I would call one. It didn't matter. She needed to leave. "Booker, please." She fell to her knees. "This is my home. I helped pick out the curtains. I planted the roses. And I paid for them," I said. "I paid for every thread. I paid for every petal. And yesterday I paid for your life with the last of my savings." I reached down and pulled her to her feet. I wasn't rough, but I wasn't gentle either. I was firm, like a structural support that refuses to bend. "The snow has melted, Lucille," I said, looking her in the eye. "The footprints are gone, and so is the man who used to shovel them for you." I turned her towards the door that wasn't there anymore, just a ragged frame opening into the night. "Go," I said. She stood there for a long moment. She looked back at me one last time. She was waiting for me to crack. She was waiting for the boring, reliable Booker to sigh and say it was okay. She was waiting for the safety net. But I just crossed my arms and stared at the wall. Finally, she let out a sob that sounded like something breaking. She turned and walked out. I watched her stumble over the debris on the porch. I watched her walk down the driveway, her silhouette disappearing into the shadows of the streetlights. She looked small and defeated, a woman who had chased a mirage and ended up in a desert. I stood there until I couldn't hear her footsteps anymore. The cold wind blew into the house. It bit through my coat. It chilled my skin, but for the first time in a long time I didn't feel the cold. I felt space. The house was empty. It was broken. It was drafty. But it was mine again. I walked over to the broken wall where the safe was exposed. I picked up the picture of the Chicago skyline Jared had torn down. The frame was cracked, but the picture was still good. I leaned it against the sofa. Then I walked to the French doors and closed them. I locked them. It was a symbolic gesture since the front door was missing, but it made me feel better. I was alone. I was 70 years old. My bank account was empty. My daughter was a criminal. My wife was gone. I sat down in my armchair. The one Jared had thrown his coat on. I brushed it off. I sat in the silence and listened to the house settle. I took a deep breath. It was finally quiet. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 24 hours, I slept. A deep, dreamless sleep. The sleep of a man who has cleaned his slate. Tomorrow I would call a contractor. A friend of mine. We would fix the wall. We would hang a new door. But tonight I would just let the wind blow through. It was time to air the place out. The morning sun broke over Chicago with a brilliance that hurt my eyes. It was the kind of crisp, clear light that usually signals a new beginning, but as I stood on my back porch, sipping a cup of coffee that tasted like ash, all I could see was the crime scene tape fluttering in the wind. The house was quiet now. The sirens were gone. The shouting was gone. Even Lucille was gone, having taken that cab to the airport hours ago. It was just me and the aftermath. Chief Stevens was standing in the middle of my backyard watching a team of forensic technicians work. They weren't looking at the shed anymore. They were looking at the ground. Specifically, they were looking at the flower bed near the old oak tree, the one place where the snow hadn't been trampled by the SWAT team because it was roped off. Mrs. Higgins sat on the porch swing wrapped in a wool blanket. She looked tired, but her eyes were alert, watching the police with the same intensity she used to watch defendants in her courtroom. Chief Stevens walked up the steps, his boots crunching on the ice. He took off his hat and rubbed his forehead. "You are a lucky man, Booker," he said. I looked at the hole in my living room wall visible through the window. I looked at the shattered front door. I looked at the empty spot where my wife's car used to be. "I don't feel lucky, Chief," I said. "I feel like a man who survived a demolition only to find out the foundation is cracked." Stevens shook his head. "No, I mean you are legally lucky. You know why we are digging up your hydrangeas." I looked at the men in the yard. One of them was holding a metal detector. It was sweeping back and forth over the snow, emitting a high-pitched whine. "I thought you were looking for the rest of the money," I said. "There is no more money," Stevens said grimly. "Jared spent it all on gambling and high-end escorts. No, Booker, we are looking for the insurance policy." The insurance policy. Suddenly, the metal detector shrieked, a solid, continuous tone. "Got something?" the technician yelled. I watched as they carefully brushed away the snow. They didn't use shovels. They used small brushes and trowels moving layer by layer. They uncovered a plastic garbage bag buried about 6 inches deep in the frozen soil. Stevens walked down to them. I followed. Mrs. Higgins stood up and joined us, her cane sinking slightly into the slush. The technician cut the bag open. Inside, wrapped in an oily rag, was a handgun. A Glock 19. Black. Ugly. I stared at it. I had never seen that gun in my life. I owned a revolver, a relic from my service days, but this was a street weapon. A killer's tool. Check the serial number, Stevens ordered. The technician ran a portable scanner over the barrel. "It is filed off, Chief," the tech said, "but I can run a ballistic match on the test fire later. But just looking at the wear on the slide, this matches the description of the weapon used in the bodega robbery on 5th Street 3 years ago. The one where the owner took 2 close-range shots to the chest. I felt the blood drain from my face. The bodega robbery. I remembered reading about it. An unsolved homicide. "What is that doing in my yard?" I whispered. Stevens looked at me. His face was grave. "Jared didn't just want your house, Booker. He wanted to make sure you could never reclaim it. If his plan to drive you crazy failed, or if you refused to sign the papers, he had a backup plan, an anonymous tip to the police. My father-in-law has an illegal weapon. I think he was involved in that robbery years ago. We come here with a warrant. We dig up the yard. We find the murder weapon." He paused, letting the horror of it sink in. "You go to prison for life. He gets the house by default." I felt my knees buckle. I grabbed the porch railing for support. It wasn't enough that he stole my money. It wasn't enough that he kidnapped my wife. He wanted to pin a murder on me. He wanted me to die in a cage labeled as a killer. "But here's the thing," Stevens continued, pointing at the hole in the ground. "And this is why I say you are lucky, or maybe smart." He pointed to the layers of snow visible in the cross-section of the hole they had dug. "Look at that, Booker. It is like looking at the rings of a tree. You see that bottom layer. That is the heavy, wet snow from Sunday afternoon. Then you see that layer of dirt where the hole was dug. And on top of it, absolute pristine powder, 4 inches of it. That is the snow from the blizzard Sunday night." He turned to me, a look of professional admiration in his eyes. "If you had shoveled this yard, if you had walked out here to check the shed, if you had even let a dog out to run, you would have disturbed those layers. You would have mixed the fresh snow with the old snow. We wouldn't be able to prove when this gun was buried. Jared could have claimed you buried it years ago. It would be his word against yours, and the gun is on your property." But Stevens smiled. "The snow on top of this gun was perfect, undisturbed. That proves the gun was buried before the blizzard hit its peak on Sunday night, specifically between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And where were you between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. on Sunday, Booker?" I swallowed hard. "I was at the grocery store," I said. "I was buying milk and bread and paying for a certain lady's groceries," Stevens added, nodding at Mrs. Higgins. "We have you on the store's security camera, time-stamped at 7:15 p.m. You have an ironclad alibi. You physically could not have been burying this gun when the snow says it was buried." He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "The snow saved your life, Booker. If you had touched it, If you had tried to clean it up, you would be looking at 25 to life. I stared at the white patch of ground. It wasn't just weather, it was a witness. A silent, frozen witness that had held the truth while everyone else was lying. I turned to Mrs. Higgins. She was watching me with a small, sad smile. "You knew," I said. My voice was trembling. "At the store. You grabbed my arm. You said, 'When your wife leaves, do not touch the snow.'" "I didn't know about the gun specifically," Mrs. Higgins said softly, wrapping her blanket tighter around herself. "I am a judge, Booker, not a psychic. But I know men like Jared. I know the pattern of the sociopath." She walked over to the edge of the porch looking down at the hole. "In my courtroom I saw it 100 times. The cover-up is always sloppy because it is rushed. They plant evidence but they forget the environment. When I saw Jared watching your house on Saturday, I didn't just see a greedy son-in-law. I saw a man setting a stage. And when a man sets a stage, he needs props." She turned to me. "I knew he would leave something behind. A key, a weapon, a bag of drugs. Something to use against you if the first plan failed. And I knew the storm was coming. Nature has a way of preserving history if we let it. I knew that if you went out there and started cleaning up, started trying to fix things like you always do, you would destroy the timeline." She reached out and touched my arm. "Booker, you are a builder. Your instinct is to fix, to shovel the walk, to repair the fence, to smooth things over, but sometimes you have to let the mess sit. You have to let the cold do its work. Because it is only in the silence of the untouched snow that the footprints of the guilty remain visible." I looked at this woman, this stranger who had paid attention when my own family hadn't. "You saved me," I whispered. "No," she said firmly. "You saved yourself. You listened. Most men wouldn't have listened to a crazy old lady in a grocery store. They would have laughed and shoveled their walk anyway because they have too much pride to let the neighbors see a messy yard." She poked my chest with her cane. "You put your pride aside, Booker. That is rare. And that is why you are standing here a free man, and Jared is sitting in a cell trying to explain why his fingerprints are on a murder weapon." Chief Stevens walked back over, zipping up his jacket. "We have enough," he said. "Between the recording, the kidnapping, and now this gun, Jared Vance is never seeing the outside of a prison again. And Chantel," he paused, looking uncomfortable. "She drove the car, Booker. The neighbor's security camera caught her SUV pulling into the alley at 6:30 p.m. She sat in the car while Jared dug the hole. She knew." I closed my eyes. The pain was a sharp stab, but it was cleaner now. It wasn't the confusing ache of betrayal. It was the surgical pain of truth. She knew. I nodded slowly. "Do what you have to do, Chief." Stevens nodded and walked away, barking orders to his team to bag the evidence. I stood on the porch with Mrs. Higgins. The sun was higher now, melting the snow. The pristine white blanket was turning into slush, revealing the brown, dead grass underneath. The beautiful lie was melting away to reveal the ugly truth. But I preferred the mud. Mud is honest. Mud is real. You can build on mud if you dig deep enough. You can't build on snow. "Come on, Booker," Mrs. Higgins said, taking my arm. "It is cold out here. And I believe you promised me a cup of coffee that doesn't taste like police station vending machine sludge." I looked at the house, the broken door, the shattered window. "I don't have a coffee maker anymore," I said. "I think it got smashed in the raid." Mrs. Higgins smiled. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. "Well then, it looks like we are going to my house. I have a French press, and David is dying to ask you about the wiring on that shutter system. He says it was genius." I smiled. A real smile. It felt rusty on my face, but it was there. "It wasn't genius," I said, leading her down the steps past the hole where the gun had been. "It was just good construction." We walked to her car. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the snow. I looked forward. The road was clear. The plow had finally come. The snow eventually melts. That is the thing about Chicago winters. They feel endless when you are in the thick of them, when the wind is cutting your face and the ice is burying your car. But the sun always comes back. It is physics. And just like the snow revealed the truth about my family, the spring sun revealed the truth about my new life. It has been 6 months since the police raided my home. 6 months since I watched my daughter being led away in handcuffs. 6 months since I became a single man at 70 years old. I stood on the sidewalk one last time looking at the house. The for sale sign had a big red sold sticker across it. The new owners were a young couple from the city. They were architects. They talked about restoring the original woodwork and opening up the kitchen. They had no idea about the hole in the wall or the broken safe or the tragedy that had played out in that living room. To them, it was just a building with good bones. To me, it was a mausoleum. I sold it for $2 million. Cash. The market was hot and the location was prime, just like Jared had said. But unlike Jared, I didn't spend the money on gambling or debts. I took that check and I drove to the south side, to a neighborhood most developers ignored. I found an old brick apartment complex that had been boarded up for a decade. The roof was leaking, the windows were smashed, and the pigeons had taken over the top floor. It was a wreck. It was perfect. I bought it, and I put my tool belt back on. They call it the barracks now. It is not fancy, there is no pool, there is no concierge. But the roof is tight, the heat works, and the rent is capped at a price a veteran on a pension can actually afford. I spend my days there now. I walk the halls listening to the stories of men and women who served their country only to be forgotten by it. I fix their sinks. I listen to their problems. I am not just a landlord. I am their neighbor. I kept the unit on the ground floor for myself. It is smaller than my old master bedroom, but it is mine. It is quiet, and the walls don't hold any secrets. Jared didn't get a deal. The district attorney, thanks to Mrs. Higgins' pressure, went for the throat. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording of him ordering the hit, the video of him drugging Lucille, the gun in the yard. The jury took less than 2 hours to convict. The judge gave him 25 years, no parole for at least 20. I went to the sentencing. I wanted to see him one last time. He looked thin, his hair was thinning. The arrogant boy who thought he could outsmart a contractor was gone. When they led him away, he looked at me. I didn't see hate in his eyes anymore. I saw fear. He is going to a place where his smooth talking won't save him. He wanted a gated community. He got one. Chantel. My heart still aches when I say her name. She avoided prison time for the conspiracy charge because she turned state's evidence against Jared. But her life as she knew it is over. The civil lawsuits from the creditors took everything: the house, the cars, the jewelry. She works double shifts at a diner near the airport now. I drove by once. I parked across the street and watched her. She looked tired. Her feet were swollen. She was wiping down a table being yelled at by a customer because his coffee was cold. She took it. She didn't argue. She just poured him a fresh cup. She is learning. Finally, she is learning what it means to earn $1. She writes me letters. Every week, a letter arrives at my new address. I don't open them. Not yet. I put them in a shoebox. Maybe one day when the box is full, I will read them. But trust is like a mirror. Once it is broken, you can glue it back together, but you will always see the cracks in your reflection. And Lucille. My Lucille. She got her wish. She is in Florida, but not in a condo in Miami. She lives in a studio apartment in a retirement community near the swamp. It is cheap, it is hot, and she is alone. Mrs. Higgins keeps tabs on her for me. She tells me Lucille spends her days sitting on a plastic chair by the community pool, telling anyone who will listen about her wealthy husband in Chicago, who is going to send for her any day now. She is waiting for a plane ticket that is never coming. She wanted the sun. Now she has nothing but sun and silence. I poured a cup of tea and stepped out onto my new porch. It is small, just enough room for 2 rocking chairs. The morning air was cool but smelled of wet earth and blooming tulips. A car pulled up to the curb. A vintage Buick. Pristine. Mrs. Higgins stepped out. She was wearing waders and a fishing vest over her silk blouse. She looked ridiculous and wonderful. Ready to go book her, she called out, waving a tackle box. The perch are biting in the harbor. I smiled. A real smile. One that reached my eyes. Mrs. Higgins and I. We make a strange pair, the retired judge from the Gold Coast and the retired contractor from the South Side. But we are the same. We are survivors. We go fishing every Tuesday. We don't talk much about the past. We talk about the Veterans Center. We talk about city politics. We argue about which bait is better. She catches more fish than me. She says it is because the fish are afraid of being held in contempt of court if they don't bite. I walked down the steps to meet her. My knees didn't hurt today. My back felt strong. I am ready, Judge, I said, taking her tackle box. But you are driving. You drive like a maniac, she laughed. A bright, sharp sound that scared a pigeon off the telephone wire. "Get in the car, Booker. Daylight is burning." I looked back at my building. I saw a young man, a Marine who lost his leg in Iraq, sitting in the window of Unit 1A reading a book. He waved at me. I waved back. He was safe. He was warm. He had a home. I built that. I got into the car and we drove off towards the lake. The window was down and the wind hit my face. It didn't feel like the biting wind of winter. It felt like a breeze. It felt like freedom. I used to think my legacy was the money I saved. I used to think it was the house I built. But I realize now that my legacy is what I do with the time I have left. I am Booker Washington. I am 71 years old. I have lost my family. I have lost my fortune. But as I looked at the vast blue expanse of Lake Michigan glittering under the spring sun, I realized something else. I have never been richer. Because for the first time in 40 years, nobody is lying to me. The snow is gone, and the path forward is clear. I took a sip of my tea from the travel mug. It was hot. It was sweet. It tasted like life. They say you cannot teach an old dog new tricks, but life has a way of grabbing you by the scruff of the neck and forcing you to learn or die. I spent 40 years building houses thinking that a strong foundation was made of concrete and rebar. I thought if I provided enough, if I worked hard enough, if I filled the bank accounts and paid the bills, that I was building a family. I was wrong. A house is made of brick, but a home is made of truth. And if you build your life on a lie, it does not matter how expensive the roof is, eventually it will collapse. I sit on the porch of the barracks now and I watch the sun go down over the city. I do not drive a luxury truck anymore. I drive a used sedan that smells like sawdust and old coffee. I do not wear Italian suits. I wear flannel shirts and work boots. To the outside world, Booker Washington is a man who fell from grace, a man who lost his fortune and his family in a scandal. But they do not see what I see. They do not see the peace. For the first time in decades, I do not have to check my back. I do not have to wonder if the smile greeting me at the door is genuine or if it is just a mask waiting for a credit card authorization. I lost $2 million in assets, but I gained something priceless. I gained my vision back. I can see people clearly now. I see the veterans in my building who share their last loaf of bread with a neighbor. I see Mrs. Higgins who fights for justice not because she is paid to, but because it is in her bones. That is real wealth. I still think about them sometimes. Jared sitting in a cell probably conning his cellmate out of a pack of cigarettes. Chantel wiping tables wondering where it all went wrong. Lucille staring at a palm tree waiting for a savior who does not exist. I do not hate them anymore. Hate takes too much energy and I need my energy for living. I just pity them. They are trapped in the prison of their own greed while I am sitting here breathing free air. Yesterday evening I went back to the grocery store, the same one where this whole nightmare started. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of turning leaves. Winter is coming again. The cycle continues. I was standing in line holding a basket with a loaf of bread and a few apples. In front of me was a young woman. She could not have been more than 25. She had a toddler in the cart, and she looked exhausted. Her coat was thin, too thin for the Chicago wind. She watched the cashier scan her items: milk, eggs, diapers, baby formula, the basics of survival. She swiped her card. The machine buzzed. That terrible low tone of rejection. She flinched. She tried again. Buzzed again. I saw her shoulders slump. I saw the heat rise in her neck. I saw the panic in her eyes as she looked at the line of people behind her. She started to take the formula out of the bag. "I am sorry," she whispered to the cashier. "I will just take the eggs. We can wait on the rest." The cashier sighed, ready to void the transaction. I felt a ghost brush against my arm. I remembered Mrs. Higgins standing in this exact spot. I remembered the shame. I remembered the dignity she lost and the dignity she gave me back. I stepped forward. "Keep it in the bag," I said to the cashier. I slid my card into the reader. It was not a platinum card anymore. It was a standard debit card from the credit union. But it worked. The machine beeped. Approved. The young woman looked at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with shock and tears. "Sir, you do not have to do that," she said. "That is $40. "I know what it is," I said, picking up my apples. "And I know what it is like to be cold. Take the milk. Feed the baby." She stood there for a moment, stunned. She looked at the groceries, then back at me. "Thank you," she choked out. "I don't know how to repay you." I walked to the door. The automatic glass slid open, letting in the chill of the evening. I turned back to her. She reminded me a little of Chantel before the world twisted her. "You do not have to repay me," I said. "Just do me a favor." "Anything," she said. I looked outside. The first few flakes of the season were starting to fall, drifting down from the gray sky, dancing in the streetlights. They were beautiful and dangerous. "When the snow falls," I said, pointing to the ground, "pay attention to it." She looked confused. "The snow?" she asked. "Yes," I said, smiling a smile that was etched with 70 years of scars and survival. "Watch where people walk. Watch where they do not. And if you see a footprint that does not belong, do not cover it up. Trust your eyes, not your ears." I turned up my collar against the wind. "Just watch the footprints in the snow," I whispered. I walked out into the night. The flakes melted on my face. I was not afraid of the winter anymore. Let it snow. Let it bury the city. I know where I am going. And this time, I am walking my own path. This story teaches us a harsh but necessary lesson. Trust is a currency, so do not spend it all in one place, even with family. Booker's blind love for his wife and tolerance for his daughter nearly cost him his life. The snow served as a metaphor for the cold, hidden truths that lie beneath a pristine surface. When people show you who they really are through disrespect, greed, or manipulation, believe them the first time. Protecting your dignity and assets is not selfishness, it is self-preservation. In the end, the only footprints you can truly rely on are your own. Thank you for listening to Booker's Journey. It was a long road from the betrayal in the blizzard to the peace of the porch, but we made it. If this story gave you chills or made you think about the people in your own life, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me bring more stories like this to light. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a gut feeling like Booker did? A moment where you knew something was wrong, even when everyone said it was fine? Tell me your story in the comments below and let me know which city you are listening from. I read every single one. Stay safe, watch your surroundings, and I will see you in the next story.